I think we've now gone live. Good morning, everybody. Sorry about this very slight delay of the 10:30 start. Welcome to 3rd of September, our Environment Select Committee meeting. Now, we've got quite a meaty agenda today, and you all know I love to get through in 2 hours, but I'm going to be struggling here today, but we will see what we can do. Firstly, can we have the apologies, Simon?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Jacob, who's substituted by Councillor Pullman.
Okay, and I think we've still got 3 that haven't given apologies that are probably on the way, which is Nick Murray, Brian Matthew and Charles McGrath. So anyway, right. So we're looking at the minutes of the previous meetings, and I believe we have one member of the public who would like to speak on this item. Is that right? And welcome, Mr. Lai. You are permitted to speak for up to 3 minutes.
Would you just be able to turn your microphone on? I'm so sorry. It's just the... Yeah, there.
Okay. I'd like to comment on the plan to enlarge the gym at Warminster Sports Centre. In my verbal submission on the 18th of July, I said the latent demand figure for June this year was not provided by the Leisure Database Company Limited because that company was wound up on the 23rd of May 22. So in response, at the same meeting, David Redfern stated that the 2024 report is produced by the Leisure Database Company. I don't know how on earth or where the information has come from that it folded in 23 because it's just produced last month the State of the Industry report for the entire national picture. So maybe people have got confused with some other company. So here is the latent demand report on which everything is based. And on the back, you'll see it was produced by Ad Leisure Limited, trading as LeisureDB, not the database, the Leisure Database Company. That company was incorporated in 2019, so this company could not possibly have generated the report in 2015. David Minton was the director of the defunct company and is now a director of Ad Leisure Limited. So this is clearly a Phoenix company. The balance sheet shows a total equity of negative £84,000. And I am very surprised that the council was tricked into believing that they were dealing with the same company that produced the original report. So I've emailed links to Companies House so that you can verify this information. Using common sense, is it reasonable that the latent demand for gyms in Warminster was unaffected by the opening of the huge Snap Fitness gym in September 21? No, of course not. It makes no sense at all. The upshot of my complaint is that the council have taken a single data point, one number, from a flaky Phoenix company as the sole basis for spending £1.5 million and demolishing 2 premium squash courts. David Redfern has admitted that the Warminster squash courts have never been promoted. So before spending taxpayers' money, the council, I feel, has a duty to try actively promoting the facilities that we already have and to perform some proper boots on the ground market research rather than this verbose computer generated nonsense. Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving your time to come along, and this is obviously just a minutes item, so there's no debate on this, and your comments have been noted. Okay, thank you. Is the committee happy for me to move the minutes of Councillor Jackson? Comment?
I do comment, yes. Apart from Mr. Bly's intervention today and his email, which has been circulated to all committee members, we've had 3 separate emails on squash court usage throughout Wiltshire, provided by 3 different people, I think from Trowbridge and Salisbury. Beg your pardon. I beg your pardon, Chairman, yes.
You have gremlins.
So it seems to me that the report, which is in the minutes, would have been a much better report had there been a call for evidence and evidence been taken and consultation been made, rather than this just having been simply an officer's decision. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So I now return to the agenda item. So are the committee happy to move the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of July as a true record? Can I have a proposal for that, please? Councillor Wallace and a seconder, Stuart Powman. All in favour? Anyone against? We got 1 against. You want that recorded, Councillor Jackson? Would you like that recorded?
Please.
Okay, right, thank you. Oh, and Councillor Budden, so,
Would you like yours recorded again?
would you like, okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a declaration for openness, please, on a number of the items in the agenda, because they deal with the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, who are my employer. I don't believe there's any conflict because I don't work in any of the areas affected, but as per the Civil Service Code, I just would like to make it clear that I'm speaking in a personal capacity and not as a civil servant if I comment or vote on any of those items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, got that, right. Right, we'll do the chairman's announcements, and I've got a few here that will take a few seconds. I have 3 announcements to make. The first is a statement from David Redfern, Director, Leisure, Culture and Communities, and relates to an item at the Select Committee's last meeting on the 18th of July. Dear Environment Select Committee, you will have received a number of emails about the presentation we made to yourselves in July in response to a public question around the Warminster project. Please be assured that all rationale, process and data supplied to the committee was accurate. Please also be assured that any of the emails that required a response are being dealt with. The second statement is from Tamsin Early, Arts and Funding Manager, and also relates to an item as the Select Committee's last meeting on the 18th of July. Following the Environment Select Committee at the meeting on the 18th of July 2024 regarding the cultural strategy, the Environment Select Committee resolutions were highlighted at the full council on the 24th of July, which approved the strategy with the resolutions. 1 was to adopt the cultural strategy. 2, include the cultural strategy as part 3B, paragraph 1.2 of the Constitution as a policy framework item. 3, delegate authority to the leader to make a decision to, if appropriate, amend the strategy in response to the resolutions of Environment Select Committee on the 18th of July. And with particular regard to the Environment Select Committee resolutions, A, request there is a budget attached to the strategy. B, climate environment is added as a key theme. Further discussion has taken place and Councillor Richard Clewer has confirmed that there will be no additional budget attached to the cultural strategy. Regarding the inclusion of the climate change as a theme during the development of the cultural strategy, the steering group was very mindful of objectives detailed in other council strategies and how the cultural strategy might contribute and interact with them. As such, the climate strategy was one of the key policies that was reviewed and discussed, and it was agreed at the Stakeholders Emerging Themes workshop that it was important that the environment cut across the whole strategy rather than a single theme, and therefore it was included as one of the 3 key principles that underpins the whole of the cultural strategy. One is to empower others, taking an enabling approach, working in partnership, co-creating and making things easier for independent action. B, environment. Be ambitious in caring for and enhancing the natural environment and addressing climate change. And also access. Work towards universal cultural entitlement and ensure all opportunities are designed to be inclusive and accessible to all. This has also been discussed with Sarah Valdis, the Director of Environment, who has endorsed this approach, in that including the environment as an underpinning principle of the strategy, it is better placed to help and affect the change. Therefore, it has been agreed that the environment remain as a key principle rather than being amended to a single theme. And the final announcement relates to the Wiltshire Local Plan Review. Following the close of the Regulation 19 consultation towards the end of last year on the draft Wiltshire Local Plan Review, the next step will be to report to Cabinet and full Council on the 8th and 15th of October, respectively, regarding the submission of the plan to the Secretary of State for independent examination. Through the consultation, more than 10,000 comments were received, which have been reviewed and further work undertaken to inform the next stage, including the preparation of the consultation statement. There will be a full member briefing around the publication of the agenda for Cabinet. So that is the end of the Chairman's announcements. And just one thing I was going to add, I just noticed on the news that Dan Bethel has won a medal in the Paralympics, and about 2 or 3 years ago we supported him in the Wiltshire Sports Awards. So that's good news for Wiltshire that we supported him, and he's won a medal for us in the Paralympics. I know he represents Team Bath now, but congratulations to Dan Bethel. Slightly off of Environment Select, but there you go. Public participation. Now, we have another 2 members of the public wishing to speak. We have Mr. Andrew Nicholson, Chair of the Wiltshire Climate Alliance, and Mr. Jeremy Wire, member of the climate-friendly Bradford Avon. So I'm going to take you first, Mr. Nicholson, if you'd like to, if you're here, if you want to come forward. Is Mr. Nicholson here? Yeah. If you'd like to come forward and sit down. And to let you know, you have 3 minutes. And welcome.
Thank you, Chair. This is impromptu, really. I haven't attended a select committee before. I haven't prepared a written submission, and I'm just really here to monitor what's going on with especially the waste strategy, but 1 or 2 highway matters as well. So I'll just flag up the concerns that I'm hoping that you'll be meeting, and one is the prospect of collecting food waste separately, financial implications and so on. You've had from the government, I think, 4 years grace since the Environment Bill of 2021 was passed. The collection was going to be mandatory by 2023. Governments have put that back successively till, I believe, financial year 2027. Since that was foreseeable, the council's been in a position to make financial provision for the costs over and above the government's burden payments, and this was something that we campaigners were forewarning you about back when you set up the contract. I think that runs till 2038. That it'll cost the council when food waste is taken out of the residual waste stream. So you've had effectively 4 free years. Hopefully the council will have been making financial structures provision for those extra costs in the meantime, and I'd be interested to hear what they are. Also, I didn't see as much about the climate implications of the waste strategy, policies, action plan, and so on, as I would have liked to see, because of course waste is putting a burden on the climate, emerging from Wiltshire Council activities, and we would have liked to see it front and centre. Oh, sorry, I'm chair of Wiltshire Climate Alliance. I'm speaking in a personal capacity as a member of Wiltshire Climate Alliance. So then, financial provisions, one thing, and perhaps some looking at radically re-engineering the waste collection and management processes. There's one thing, snippet of news I saw, which is that you can now get refurbished electrically converted bin lorries for about half the price of a brand new electric bin lorry. Those are just some snippets. I'm more minded to sit back and hear what you have to say. I don't know if it's in order for a member of the public to raise a hand at some later point in the proceedings to make an observation, a brief observation, or ask an impromptu question, but I'll leave that in your hands, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Nicholson, for your statement. There obviously is no debate on this one, but thanks for your interest, and you're obviously welcome to remain. See what sort of mood I'm in, but it's very unlikely I'll be able to get a question. So I've got members here who are very active and very interested. Okay, thank you very much.
I can see that. Thank you.
Our next member of the public is Mr. Jeremy Wire, member of the Climate Friendly Group from Bradford and Avon. Good morning and welcome, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning. I am totally unprepared, I'm afraid to say. I have no question, but I would like to comment on the items in the agenda, particularly the footpath strategy. Is it a strategy? I don't know. And how important it is that we encourage as much walking and cycling across the county as possible. And I think that will be the extent of my statement. Thank you very much.
It's the best 3 minute statement I've had this year. Thank you very much. That is fantastic. I hope that sets a precedent for the morning. Right. Thank you for your comments. Right, we'll move on then. So, let's say we've got a lot to do, a lot to get through. So, we're now going to move into the main part of the agenda. So, can our committee members, during our fourth discussions, keep any statements to a minimum? The word parochial might be a bit difficult here when we talk about highways, but just try and be subtle and get round it somehow else. So, we're going to go to item 6, which is the household waste management strategy. I obviously welcome Councillor Dominic Munn, Cabinet Member for Waste and Environment, and he will introduce the item. And there are some other members here that you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is the first Environment Select, which I've brought a report to as my role as Cabinet Member for Environment and Waste. I'm conscious, Chairs, as you've said, you've got quite a packed agenda. So what we're going to do, rather than take you piece by piece through the report and regurgitate all the information there, you've had the report, you will have had a chance to have digested it. So we'll focus very much on the top line elements and then having a good discussion and answering your questions there. By way of a brief introduction, the report itself provides members of the Environment Select Committee with updates on the Council's adopted household waste management strategy. Now, that strategy, which covers the period 2017 to 2028, incorporates a commitment to provide annual updates to ESC, so to keep you in the loop of the progress that's being made, hence our presence today. So the report that Sarah Martin will take you through covers the following elements. It's a review of relevant legislation and national policy changes which affect household waste management strategy. And as you'll appreciate, this is an ever-changing landscape, and we're all waiting. It's quite interesting what Councillor Wallace said earlier. We're all waiting with bated breath for updates from DEFRA on how we should be handling waste into the future. So that's, as I say, ever-changing, but we'll bring you up to speed as to where things are at the moment. You will have seen a report on the performance of the Waste Management Service in 2023 and 24, and a report on progress against our action plan as well. So you'll be able to see where we are. And then finally, you'll see a presentation of a revised action plan for the Waste Management Service for the next year. And so what we're seeking from the committee today is the following: consideration of the report and its appendices, comment on the household waste management strategy update and the action plan for next year, and then finally your endorsement of that action plan. So, Chair, if you're happy, I'd like to hand over to Sarah Martin to take you through the report. Thank you.
Hello. Again, as we said, we're not going to take you through page by page in the report. I just wanted to highlight a couple of the key achievements for this year. So for me, the increase in the recycling rate, we wanted to highlight that up to 43.7%. And also the reduction in our waste to landfill. We're hoping to see further reductions in waste to landfill in this next year as well, with a new piece of equipment that we have procured, which will be looking at shredding some of the more difficult to deal with waste, so the bulky waste materials. So we're hoping to see in this next year to see that come down even further. At this stage, I'll hand over to Martin as to whether he's got any key bits that he wants to highlight, but we are very much open to your questions on any elements within the report.
Thank you, Sarah, and hi, everyone. So, yeah, just a couple of key things to run through as headlines. In respect of the policy changes, Environments Act 21 still remains the key driver for quite a fundamental amount of legislative change that will have an impact on Wiltshire Council's collection services of the future. So the report does talk about a couple of key elements of the Act that are coming through. Deposit return scheme will impact all consumers where they buy a drinks container at a point of sale. So we're talking about cans of Coke and plastic bottles, that kind of thing. So Environment Act 21, Environment Act 21 is looking to bring that forward 2027. There have been indications in the media that the new government are inclined to try and bring that forward, but we have no detail on that at this point. The impact on the Wiltshire Council waste services is that consumers will have to pay a deposit of, let's say, around 20p on every container that they purchase at the supermarket or retail outlet, and they will be encouraged to redeem that deposit at the point of sale using reverse vending machines. The potential impact of that is that could mean that we lose an element of income from some materials that currently would go through the curbside collection services if people choose to redeem that. But standing back from the impact on local authorities, if that's how consumers do respond to it, the UK would expect to see quite a significant increase in general recycling rates. So that's deposit return scheme. The next thing is extended producer responsibility, where producers of packaging will, for the first time, be held accountable for the full costs of the collection and management of the packaging that they place into the market. They will be obliged to pay into a producer compliance scheme effectively, which in turn will distribute funding across local authorities up and down the country to support our recycling activities. Up to this point, our funding is derived from council tax and effectively income from the materials we manage to sell if it's good quality recycling. So that's good news. In principle, we're waiting to see the detail, and we should have information towards the end of this financial year as to what funding we may get from the scheme administrator in the coming years. That could fundamentally change the landscape of recycling as far as we're concerned, on the basis that the EPR scheme will introduce modulated fees whereby items of packaging which are known to be difficult and tricky to recycle will attract a higher fee, thereby incentivizing packaging producers to use more easily recyclable materials and design better recyclable materials. So that's good news for the waste industry across the UK, and we would anticipate that that is going to allow us to increase our recycling rates. And then we've got simpler recycling, which directly impacts on all local authorities that collect waste. There are core materials set out for all council to collect. Happily, Wiltshire Council already complies with those, so plastic containers, glass, cans, paper, cardboard. But it does include this requirement to collect food waste, which for Wiltshire Council is going to come in from August 2027, and reflecting on the fact that it will have an impact on our landfill diversion contracts, as we'll be putting less residual waste through those facilities. But we are working through the impacts of that and working to bring those services forward. In addition to that, we're going to be required by law to collect flexible plastics, so soft plastics, so bread bags, plastic films. We can do the plastic pots, tubs and trays currently, but the plastic films are a problem. They need to be collected from 2027. Government has recognised that currently there is insufficient UK-based capacity to allow us to recycle that material, hence why there's that modest delay before making it a mandatory requirement on councils. So I think those are the key kind of policy drivers that we're responding to currently, and to assure all members around the table in designing new services, we are also looking at the opportunities to reflect on the carbon emissions that are associated with the service and looking at the opportunities to reduce that. I don't know whether we've mentioned we've got a first electric vehicle likely to come online later in the year. So again, demonstrating opportunities to improve the services where we can. But at that point, I think I'd open it up to questions.
Well, thank you for the debate. The question things right. So hands going up. So Councillor Jackson and then Councillor Budden, and I'll come to the other side as well. Right.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I congratulate Charlotte on the excellent report, which I've enjoyed reading. Thank you very much. I've got three points or three questions to make. Firstly, the redemption of these cans and bottles. I'm wondering whether or not there is either a tension or an opportunity, because if people adopt these things and they go and claim their 20 pences back, and I can imagine that if you've got a lot of containers, it will be worthwhile redeeming them, whether that may have a downstream effect on our own household curbside collections, with a possibility even of making what is currently a fortnightly collection either a 3-weekly or a monthly collection. But I'm quite sure you'll be monitoring the volumes and making a decision in your own account. Secondly, a note of congratulation. I want to congratulate your reuse and repair scheme based on the household recycling centres. I think that's very welcome, and I congratulate you for putting that in. And my final point, and you will have heard me mention this before, Malaby Biogas Digester is within my electoral division, and I am interested to know whether or not we're going to be having some sort of pilot scheme on food waste collection, which could involve Malaby. Much obliged, Chairman.
Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to take those questions possibly in reverse order, although I don't know whether the question was really the final statement, really, rather than the proceeding. So Malaby Biogas, I think in reality, because we now have a mandatory requirement to issue food waste collections across the council area, we understand, by or from August 2027. And there is sufficient empirical evidence from across the country from those authorities that we know that already collect food waste, that there's likely to be a limited benefit directly in putting a trial together. So my view as an officer would be we will be focusing, given the very limited amount of time that we've actually got available to design and launch those services, focusing on delivering those rather than looking at an area by area opportunity. We are, however, though, having conversations with local providers, because obviously we need that food waste to go somewhere. So those conversations are ongoing.
Yeah, just to add to that, and I suppose it sort of hints at Councillor Jackson's wider point on collection services and further processing and how that might look, but also drawing on the comments from Andrew at Wiltshire Climate Alliance. We're currently in the process of looking at this whole process, and what I want to really make clear is this isn't a race. This is something that's hugely important to residents in Wiltshire. It's a hugely expensive service to run. It has massive consequences for residents and also for the environment. So there are so many factors, and as we dig deeper and deeper into the various options, and with every change of government policy that comes along, we suddenly realise we're very pleased actually that we're not necessarily first past the post on some of this stuff, because we need to see exactly what happens, and food waste and how to process that is a very good example of it. So when it comes to, as Andrew said, asked earlier, environmental impact of waste collection and the processing of it, re-engineering of the waste collection service, that is very much what the team is busy looking at the moment. And even up until yesterday, my cabinet colleagues were receiving briefings from Sarah and Martin on the various options that are available.
Okay, Councillor Bud.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll also pay a compliment first. I think there's some really good stuff in this report, and I'm pleased to see two things in particular. First of all, if I've got it right, there's a 30% increase in the volume of dry recyclables being sorted out. I think that's an excellent achievement, and I wish you well for further increases in that. And as it were, as an assistance to that, the appointment of an engagement officer, which I think is going to be very valuable in bringing this to the public's attention. Let me just say, I would encourage you to open up the process of sorting out dry recyclables to the public. I would urge you to encourage councillors, not only members of this council, but also parish councillors, to come and see the MRF, visit it, see what's done, understand what you're doing. The better the understanding, the greater the take-up will be. But I do have two significant reservations about this report. Surprise, surprise. Firstly, let me pick up on what Mr. Nicholson said also in his remarks at the beginning. I asked, I think about a year ago, I can't remember whether it was a cabinet or in council, for a clear statement as to the carbon emissions associated with the very large volume of our waste that goes for burning. I was assured at the time that work was being done to assess that, but I don't see any reference to it in here. So I would ask, what are the carbon emissions associated with the burning and incineration of our waste, whether it's done here in the UK, at the plant outside Slough, or whether it's done after processing through the MBT plant in Holland or in Germany. I'd go further and ask, what are the carbon emissions associated with each of the streams of material that go through our waste process? And why isn't that, to use Mr. Nicholson's phrase, front and centre of our policy? This is an important environmental policy, and the impact on the climate of what we're doing with our waste as residents of the county is important. The other reservation I have, despite the fact that, Councillor, you made reference to the fact that this is a very expensive process, and Mr. Litherland has made reference also to the costs of doing various things, I see barely a single pound sign in this report. I would like to know, what is the cost per kilo of sending our waste to landfill? What is the cost per kilo of sorting out the glass, taking into account what we get paid for the cullet that results? What's the cost per kilo of dealing with dry recyclables, and the cost per kilo of sending all that material for incineration? And that, I think, is a fundamental question which needs to be addressed in reports of this kind. Cost per kilo and kilos of CO2 generated. Those two tables ought to be in here, both per kilo, by the way, and grossed up for the total volumes.
Sarah, you can have that one.
Yeah, I'll take that one aboard. So thank you very much. So we are doing a lot of work on the carbon emission side of things. There isn't a standard formula at the moment that is recognised for carbon emissions for all of the processes. So we're working very closely with RAP, the Waste Resource Action Programme, to look at the carbon reporting processes that they have and how we can apply them to all of our services and tweak them to the individual changes that each local authority has. So that is a work in progress, and that's something that we are very keen to make sure that we are at the forefront of and reporting on in the future. It's also a key area that we are making sure is into consideration when we're only looking at any future changes to collection services, so the impacts of food waste collections, etc., so that we make sure that we're taking into account those carbon impacts as well. So it's something that's very close to my heart and something that we're working very, very closely on, as I said, with RAP, but unfortunately the metrics aren't there at the moment, but we're keeping pushing on that and we're developing that and we're hoping that we'll see more coming forwards. So please don't think that has been forgotten, but we don't have the data that is reliable at this time, but we keep pushing for that information. On the cost, on the actual financial cost per kilogram, certainly we have all of that information and we can make sure that is definitely included within future reports, and we'll make a note of that or come back to the committee if that's something that you would like as an additional item.
You want to come back?
May I very briefly, Chairman? I'd be grateful if you would set us or be willing to share with us a deadline for getting some outcome. Your answer regarding the work on carbon emissions is, with all respect, virtually what you said a year ago. And I understand it takes time. I am aware of that, but really, you know, it can't be just left to run. It's a climate emergency. That's what we declared. I do think that an addendum or an appendix with the cost information could be produced if it's available and added on to this report for the committee. And I would propose that as something the committee could agree to, please.
Okay, well, we'll consider that when we come to the end of the debate. Councillor Jackie Lay.
Thank you. So I enjoyed reading the report, which I think probably is a sad reflection on some of us. I've been looking at waste since about 1994, 30 years now, since the Parkgate farm at Purton applied for an extension of the landfill. And at that time, I did an exhibition actually, and at that time there was all these different ways of dealing with waste then, and we still are not dealing with it correctly. One of the big things is education, and I think we need to be targeting the education side of things. Reading the report, a few things came to mind straight away. Was that obviously we're sending some waste to landfill. So it would be quite interesting to know what that waste is, as to, is it waste? Because one of the things that I understand is that when people take their black bags to the HRC, because it wasn't collected curbside, it goes into the crusher and that goes to landfill. Well, that's crazy, because it should be going into curbside, so it goes into the other streams where we deal with it. So it would be quite useful, as I say, to know that. Obviously, I picked up on page 30 with regard to, you know, how we're dealing with waste. But one of the big things that's happened is this huge change in how people shop now. And all these home deliveries that keep coming in with all the cardboard and paper and packaging that comes with that. And potentially that will change with this new legislation. But obviously there is carbon footprint there, having it all delivered to you. And I was also interested on, I think it was paragraph 31 rather than page 31, that there was more recycling done during COVID. So perhaps this shows us that when people are sat at home with not much to do, they are prepared to spend a bit of time looking at it. 5.5, page 38, you do mention in figure 11 about batteries, and I noticed also at the top of that heading the word textiles, incorrectly spelt, 2 T's, but that's beside the point. We don't do textiles anymore, do we? We do the batteries in the plastic sandwich bags. So I wondered whether we're going to be looking at textiles again. I I also noticed that on figure 15, page 41, the percentage that goes to landfill from each of the HRCs, that is 21.1% at Amesbury, and obviously it's much lower at other places. So it'd be interesting to know what we're doing to try and deal with those situations. I was also, my maths has never been very good, and I know that you're saying 42% goes for recycling, and I noticed in paragraph 10 you've got 226,000 tonnes were collected 23-24, potentially 216,000 tonnes were municipal waste, and we have contracts to take 110,000 tonnes to presumably per year to Lakeside or to Westbury. So what happens to the other 116,000 tonnes? If we take the recycling level, that's about 89 to 95,000 tonnes, depending which figure. So there's 20,000 tonnes missing somewhere. So as I say, it may be my maths, but could we look at that to make sure we've got all our figures right? Because if so, there's 20,000 tonnes floating around somewhere. You don't mention in the report about all the other providers who are collecting stuff, like the blister packs for medications, the pet food containers. And I know that I personally don't mind sorting this all out. I have space to store it all. But a lot of people don't have space to store it all. So they will be putting waste that isn't being collected by us through recycling into the general waste. I know I don't throw any of my food waste away, sorry, but I don't. It's all composted. So how are we going to help people in this rural county to compost better, which might reduce down our food wastes? And you were talking about the packaging tax, is what I called it, and how that at the moment council tax is paying the cost for recycling, which, you know, is a burden. But because if the public think that the manufacturers are going to be paying for the recycling through packaging tax, will it change their attitudes to how they're going to deal with their waste, and will they just throw it in the bin because they'll take the view, well, we're not paying for it now through council tax? But it all goes back to education. We need to educate our young. Sorry.
Just a couple of questions there. I don't know how you want to take that. Okay.
Thank you very much for the questions, Councillor. Much appreciated. I will do my best here. So I think possibly again going back in reverse, the packaging issue. I don't think that's necessarily going to have any kind of real impact on how residents are going to respond, because this is behind the scenes. This is the packaging producers will pay into a central pot. Nobody will know anything about it other than the producers and the councils that are hopefully going to be the recipients of a good amount of that funding. And that funding is absolutely about being designed to help councils expand and extend and continue to provide their recycling services. Whether it's funded by council tax was, you know, possibly not the best description. It's funded by the authority. It's a cost of the authority at the moment, and currently councils, where they can, will try to mitigate those costs through the sale of recyclable materials where they're able to. Just to say, we have a good record in Wiltshire with sale of recyclables. I think we generated 2.8 million of receipts through the sale of recyclables. So there's some really good stuff going on with residents putting the right things in the right bins and us recycling it. You mentioned the composting and encouraging composting. I think the response to that is twofold, and we've been doing this for a while, and we are looking at opportunities of re-promoting this. But we have our subsidised food waste digesters that do take garden waste as well. In fact, they work better if it's a combination of food waste and garden waste from the garden. So it's now cheaper to avail yourselves of one of those Green Johanna units rather than pay for the collection of garden waste. And the charge for collection of garden waste, we know, does encourage some people to compost at home because it's that financial equation for some families. The blister packs, we don't collect blister packs. It's it's a good illustration of where extended producer responsibility, the packaging tax, as you described it, might come in. At the moment, they are really difficult to recycle. It's a thin layer of plastic with a thin layer of foil, and you need to separate those to recycle it. If you can't do that, really your only option is to send it to Energy from Waste. The extended producer responsibility scheme will encourage producers of packaging to design things better. I can't say it necessarily will alter the composition of blister packs on the basis that from a medicinal point of view, clearly there are standards that need to be met, but in other categories of packaging, you are going to see some differences, I think. And I think as consumers, we're already seeing that with more recyclable cardboard coming through with online deliveries and brown paper rather than plastic bags and those kind of things. Amesbury landfill, you mentioned the HRCs and the disparity between some sites. I think primarily the major reason for those disparities is that some of those sites are able to tap into markets where the soil and rubble is sent for reprocessing and is used again. In other circumstances, it is perhaps used as a landfill cover, in which case, whilst it's replacing virgin soils, which is a good thing, it's landfill cover, it's going into landfill, so we have to record it as landfill. So it's a calculation issue. You mentioned calculations as well. I think one of the issues we've got is that quite often in the report we will be talking about the amount of waste collected. That's not necessarily the same amount of waste that gets recycled, because there's conversations with many members around the table. We've been working very hard as a service to try and encourage better quality of recycling going into the curbside recycling bins, bag sorting at household recycling centres. There's a couple of examples, but really trying to focus on residents understanding that you've got to put the right things in the right bins, because otherwise the sorting facility does struggle to separate out the materials. So you have a reject element there. So sometimes when you look at these different bits of information, unfortunately you do end up comparing apples with pears. I'm pretty confident that the numbers will be accurate and reflective of the actuals, but we will have another look through, and if there are issues, we will update the panel. Textiles, again, a potential extension of the extended producer responsibility scheme is potentially going to include the producers of textiles. The current markets aren't there, which is why we do not collect it. We collected it for quite a while when we were struggling to find end markets, and it was just leading to a backlog that we could not get rid of. So we've taken the decision to focus our energies on those materials that we know we can recycle. But that is something that we are consistently looking at. But again, it's a difficult one for Wiltshire Council to fix. We can certainly influence, and we do where we can with professional discussion panels and technical groups across the waste industry, but it's an waste industry thing that needs to come together there. And I think I ran out of my notes at that point, so apologies.
Well done. Thank you very much. That's some great answers to all those questions. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to thank you for an excellent report. And I was able to read quite a lot of it during Jackie's question and Martin's answer there. I would agree with the comments made earlier about it not being entirely clear what the priorities are for the new government yet. But ministers are back from recess today, so hopefully in the next few months we should have some direction on that. But I would say that the fact that Minister Cree has been given the title of Minister for the Circular Economy sort of gives an indication where the government is looking. So my question is focused on page 53 of the agenda, which is sort of the action plan that's there. And at the risk of incurring the Chair's wrath, I'm going to be a little bit parochial and say I'm really pleased that there's a lot of mentions of a Great Devices charity in there, KFR. And action B and C talks about using them for separating good quality items and bulky household waste from the bulky household waste collection for reuse rather than recycling or landfill. And I think that's exactly the sort of thing that we should be looking at. But I note Action B has been deferred because they didn't have the space. Action C appears to be going ahead. My question is, are we looking at expanding this across the county and perhaps working with other charities, if there are any who do similar things? Because this is quite a lot for one fairly small charity to be dealing with. Thank you.
I think I've got some good news to respond to that question with the arrangement with Kennet Furniture Reuse or Kennet Furniture Recycling is progressing. So our primary HRC provider, FCC Environment, are working with them very closely. We've been looking at a business case for a reuse shop to be set up at those premises, and that seems to be progressing pretty rapidly, actually. It will be run on a bit of a trial basis, I think, initially for us to see how it works, but certainly now that we've been intercepting materials for reuse more systematically at the household recycling centres, we can see that there's good material coming through. We've done the trial, that's proved successful. So from my perspective, I think it looks to be all systems go. It's something we're continually looking at and extending that to the curbside collection of bulky household waste as well. That material would typically have gone to landfill. I think one of Jackie's other questions was, what's the stuff that goes to landfill? And it's predominantly those bulky household waste items or material from the household recycling centres. So we are constantly looking to displace more of that into either reuse, recycling, or energy recovery, and following the waste hierarchy in that context.
Yeah, if you want to get back.
Quick follow-up on that. Another thing that happened a couple of years ago, I think, is that there was a pop-up shop in Devizes Marketplace along these lines, and that appeared to be very successful. Is that another option that could be added into this having a permanent shop?
Yeah, it's all part of the considerations and the evidence that's gone into that business case. I mean, what it demonstrated was there was a clear desire, once people knew that facility was there, to participate and use that. So yeah, it was highly successful. We know that can be replicated in a store premises type of environment, and we also know that there's a lot of evidence and data from other councils that have done that. We've been trying to progress this for a number of years, yeah, we never quite get there, but it does feel like we're closer than we've ever been. So hopefully we'll have some good news on that fairly shortly.
And to be fair, that KFR does, just although it's Devizes based, it does support a whole area, a large area around the county. So it's just not Devizes based. Councillor Rounds.
Try again. Thank you. Martin, good to see you again. Councillor Budden, notwithstanding, thank you for a very thorough report, as ever, coming out of your department every year. I have a query concerning the extended producer responsibility fees, tax, call it what you will. It strikes me that the funding for this will clearly fall on the consumer, because no sensible producer in the modern age, never mind in the past, would sell a product and then take the hit on a tax such as this. Now, I notice right at the bottom of this particular paragraph that it says opportunity to receive funding from the EPR compliance scheme to cover collection and recycling disposal costs. So assuming that recovery of funds will go to the local authority. So we are presented here as Joe Public with the prospect of being double taxed. Firstly by the producer and secondly by the council. It's not something that I think is fair. And I would ask that certainly our local authority investigate this particular proposal a little further to ensure that that doesn't happen. And I have another question here. Initially, could I just have a yes or no, please? Is there an overarching body that links all local authority waste departments and that you meet regularly and swap ideas, best practice? Is there one?
I'll answer that one. Yes, there are two that represent waste disposal authorities and waste collection authorities, and also one that it represents directors as well in the whole of the place area, and we swap and share ideas.
So my question, the second question is, given that you're clearly the arbiters of best practice in waste management and the producers of foods are not, they will always seek the easiest and cheapest route. Would it not make sense for you as a body to get together and produce standards of packaging based upon your experience of disposing of this packaging, to then present it either to government to impose on food producers, or to get the food producers around the table with you and suggest that they should maybe investigate your proposals? Thank you.
On that latter point then, just to explain a little, there is a lot of conversations that happens between the local authority. So there's the overarching organisations of Nordo and Larrock, and also Adept, with packaging organisations. There's a particular packaging organisation called InkPen that's been an awful lot of work that's been done with them on trying to look at how we can look at best practice on packaging materials and recyclability of those packaging materials. So there are some packaging materials out there which are very easy to recycle, and there are some which are more composite, where you get a mixture of cardboard, plastic, foil, etc., that makes it a lot harder to recycle. So there are a lot of those conversations that happen already. There's also a lot of work that happens via WRAP, so the Waste Resource Action Programme, who does a lot of work with producers of packaging to help them look at what they're doing to reduce their waste, and to think about the best designs so that they are looking at that circular economy. So that we can think about materials from cradle to grave and hopefully keeping going around that circle rather than it ending up having to be a one-use product. So I just wanted to reassure you there's a lot of work already going on those areas.
Just checking there's no other hands. Derek, you're all having so right. I don't normally let someone come back in, Jackie, but you're going to have a real quickie here, right?
Real quickie, only it's a quick advert. I go to Jersey regularly on holiday because my daughter lives there. And one of my first places that I go to is Acorn, and also now Darrell Zoo, because they do all of what Kennet refurbishments are doing. And I think it's a really good model. And there's an opportunity for you to go away on holiday to Jersey and go and see what Acorn are doing. Because, you know, bits of old furniture comes in that's no use to anybody. The people who work there, who are mainly people with disabilities, they make it into something else, and it's been sold, and they get good money for it.
What's the advertising done for Jersey? Okay, right. So as a committee, how can the scrutiny help with the process of the waste transformation? Is there anything that we can do as a committee to help you? Because that's what we're here for, to scrutinise and ask questions. And so if there's anything we can do to help you, we're more than happy to do it. Before I go to the proposal, I was in a supermarket the other week and noticed that they're starting to go over to paper, more paper stuff rather than packing in plastic. And I think if we get all the bigger supermarkets to go that way, and I think that's the way they're going, because plastic is the main thing that when it gets disposed of, the disastrous thing, but paper is something we can dispose of easier. So anyway, thank you for your report. It's been really good. I've got some proposals. Oh, sorry, Derek, I am really sorry. Apologies. Come on. Sorry.
There we go. Yeah, thank you for the report. And I also like to say that Dominic and I visited the Malaby biodigester. It was very interesting and illuminating, particularly over the pollutants. And I think we picked up on that. you know, the sort of bagging of the waste in the first place. I'm interested to know that you are basically following up on that and making sure that the capacity will be in place by the time we actually have to go ahead with this. I think I don't know if I'm missing something here, but a couple of KPIs I think would be very interesting, which is if you like, the pollutants in the bins. So, for example, in the in the recycling bin, what proportion of that is actually pollutants? We know that we return bins that presumably the bin men check and then return them. So we know about that. But actually what proportion is incorrectly placed in the bin? And in addition, what have we got in terms of pollutants within the general waste bin, i.e. recyclable items? Because it seems to me that this is about what Jackie is talking about, which is an education process. And I'll be interested to know whether we follow that up with things like working with schools, because I know that it's often children that basically pick up on these things and educate their parents. And I also think that we could do with things that very, very clearly bang on the bin that say, this is what we take, this is what we don't take. I think those things would be quite helpful. Thank you.
Does anybody want to respond to that?
There is some information in the report under the action plan reporting, where it does talk about the reject rate, which gives you the details on how much materials have been put into the bin that we then can't recycle. So with the raw materials, so there is some information within the report. Happily afterwards, point you to exactly where that is in there. Education of children, yeah, something that we think very strongly on, and with our communications and education officers that we now got in post, we'll be looking very much with them about how we can increase that education, because very much believe, as well as a mother with small children, that they are the ones that we need to educate, and they very often tell me if I'm doing things wrong as well. So in a variety of ways. So yeah, that is always something that's high on the list. When it comes to the labels on the bins, we generally try to avoid that one because they go out of date. So if there is, for instance, a material that we can then introduce and rechange. So this is why we go down more on the lines of leaflets and informations on the website, because we've found that is more responsive to any changes that are made in the collection services. So we have had comments before from people where they've got bins which have got old stickers on and saying, I didn't know I could do this because my bin says it can only do X, Y, and Z. But of course, our services have changed over years. So I completely take on board the point that you're saying about stickers on bins, but it is something that we have avoided recently. Martin.
Just to pick up on that final point and a bit of a shout out to our waste and recycling engagement officer who sat behind me in the room and has had an immediate positive impact on some of the messaging that we've been putting out. But we are seeing really great results from our use of social media. So I'd ask Simon and Democratic Services colleagues if there's any way that we could, as part of the minutes, include a link to how people could sign up for their email updates, because we do an awful lot of, we provide a lot of regular information, hints and tips, all that kind of stuff. We have a waste newsletter that's got some of the highest click-through rates of some of the newsletters that the council's issued in recent times, and it seems to be a really effective way of trying to get these messages across. So given the kind of limitations that Sarah has outlined about stickers on bins, I think this is a really useful kind of alternative method, and absolutely picks up Councillor Budden's comments about, education about the importance of getting the right things in the right bins and reducing that contamination. That's what we're all here to do. Thank you.
Just one thing is that there's a lot of holiday accommodation in this county. I know that people that stay in places, if they don't bother, what they do is they go to the bin. You're lucky if they recycle anything. And there's an opportunity there to work, which is where I think that if we could request something to stick on the bin, okay, you might not go out globally and do it on all bins, but that would be helpful. Thanks.
So rather than having 30 mile an hour and 20 mile an hour on your bins, we can have what to put on the bins and the waste disposal. Right, so I'm going to take the proposals and Councillor, no, we've added one on, so if you're happy with that, we'll take it. So A, to note the content of the report. B, endorses the 2024-25 action plan. C, receives an addendum to the current report outlining the cost per kilogramme per disposal activity before the end of the year. And D, request a further update in 12 months' time to include additional information on waste, carbon emissions and communication / education programmes. You happy with that, Councillor Button?
That last one had to be 12 months, another year. I asked for it a year ago. I appreciate it takes time. I'd go back to the
At the current time, I would say yes, we do need the extra time to be able to get that data because, as I've said, it's not easily available, and there's been a lot of work that's happened in the last year, but we don't have the full data available yet on the carbon impact of all waste streams.
So there you go, Councillor Bell. We've got your 12 months, which could be better than 2 years. Okay, right. So all those in favour of that proposal, please show your hands. Anyone against? Okay, right. Those proposals are carried. Thank you very much, then, the team, for that. And we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is item 7, and that is the street scene and grounds maintenance contract update. We have our Councillor Nick Holder now coming forward to this one, I think, and his team, probably Parvis and Adrian. Right, welcome then, team. So now this is the number 7. Nick, you can introduce it.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee. I'm conscious of your... Pardon? I'm conscious of your time that you set at the beginning. So I don't intend to actually say huge amounts here and take it as read that the report in front of you under agenda item 7 has been read by the committee. We have Adrian Hampton, Head of Service, to my left. Parvis is here to my right, who are able to take questions. But before I do that, I just want to if I may, Chair, you can indulge me for 30 seconds. I've listened intently with the comments were made about, how we need to educate our children. And it's a shame that the waste team have left, because the young girl the young officer who was sitting here, Charlotte, she's recently been appointed to a role in terms of our external comms with waste. And it really surprises me and disappoints me that members of this committee, A, weren't aware of her role, and B, haven't made use of her. Because in July, I invited her to Bower Hill Primary School, where she did a 40-minute session as part of a full school assembly, where she presented a video about the MRF, to pick up your Councillor Budden. She had a load of waste materials with her, and she did a quiz with the school. So that facility exists to all of us as councillors, exists to all of us to be done with parish and town councils, and I would urge you and recommend you to take up that opportunity. I had fantastic feedback from the children, and most importantly, the head teacher and the parents of the school. So I would urge all of you to take that opportunity. That is a key element of the role that she's been recruited to do. So moving on now, there was a report in front of you from the street scene team. It's a very short report, and I'm really open to questions for Adrian and Parvis.
Parvis, nothing from Major at this stage. We just go to questions and then you take them. Is that how you want to play it? Yep. Okay. Right. Jackie's got her hand up first, and then Stuart too. So okay, Stuart Wheeler second. Right.
Sorry, I I have actually got several pages of questions.
Hey?
Not on this one, you'll be pleased to know, on the whole report.
Is that a meeting for tomorrow you're on about the questions?
That's why I don't feel
Okay,
thing.
okay.
And to answer Nick Holder, councillor Holder's question, I actually went to my primary school and did a waste presentation to them last year, and sent the paperwork and the information that I'd did to the waste team so they could see what I did. So hopefully that's why we have Charlotte.
Indeed.
Brilliant. So going on to street scene and ground maintenance, I'm conscious, trying to keep this out of parochial, but I'm conscious that we have missed areas, and I'm just wondering how many missed areas we do have. I'm also aware that on, I think it was paragraph 10 or page 10, I'm confused with all my pages now, we're talking about cutting of grass, but does it also include cutting back of brambles and the overgrown shrubs and trees that we're having? I'm also aware that in my, again, being parochial, and I'm sure it happens across the county, that many of our residents cut the grass verges outside. They are an ageing population and they will stop, and what that impact might be. I'm also conscious that we don't seem to have an equality across the county. We have some parishes and towns that do a lot of the work themselves and others who don't. So I'm just wondering, you know, how we sort of stack that up. I mean, I'm conscious in my community, again, being parochial, we deal with the cemetery. It's done by the parish council. We run our toilets, we run our parks, we empty our bins. So when we have an extra bit of grass that's not being cut, it sort of rather sticks in the throat of the residents, because they're saying, surely you could cut that little bit, but you're not doing it because it's not ours, but you're cutting all that bit. Sorry.
Well done. Carry on.
I'll respond very briefly and then hand over to Adrian to give some specifics. I think what needs to be reiterated here is that there has been a significant devolution of service to both parish and town councils, and that has been done in conjunction with the asset devolution, and we have a very clear G-mapping process which indicates which areas have been devolved, which areas still sit under the responsibility of the street scene team, and then the further level of geomapping, which actually indicates the frequency of the cut. And I have to say, and it kind of sticks in the craw somewhat, we actually would prefer residents not to cut the grass that they don't think is being cut properly. And the reason I say that is that it sometimes confuses ID Verdi, because they pitch up somewhere expecting to cut a piece of grass. They see that it's been cut by a resident being helpful. So they then make an assumption, which I think is a reasonable assumption, judging by a number of nods around the room, that there's been a change of schedule. So maybe the next time they come along, they don't cut it. So it's, and I say it sticks in the craw. I know residents are trying to be helpful, but actually the best way for the residents to understand the frequency of the cut and the responsibility of the cut actually is either to come through to us here at Wiltshire Council, to Adrian's team, or to go to their parish and town council and ask for clarity rather than do it themselves, because that then avoids some of the issues we see that bits just get left. I'll hand over to Adrian to respond to your other question.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take it obviously down the list. So first of all, what we have, and it's accessible to everybody, because town and parish councils, we have a baseline mapping area. So what we did at the beginning of the last contract was we consulted with all the town and parish councils, in essence, about the frequency of grass cutting, what should be provided, where should be provided. And that was used as the basis of the original contract, the contract before this one. So that's our baseline layer. And what we did following that consultation was with the Ida Verde contract, and the successful tendering with this, we tendered that mapping layer. So what there is a mapping layer which obviously you've got access to, Town and Parish. Now, what happens is when we say missed, what the predominant thing is, what is happening, for some reason along the way, areas when we say that are not mapped, because if they're mapped, it's really quite simple. We've already got an agreement with Ida Verde, we've already got a payment with them, and if they miss that, we simply phone them up, and we've even got tracking devices that shows did they cut it, didn't they cut it, and about what's going on. What we've actually got though is we've got a considerable number of areas that there is a number of areas which historically were not within our maintenance, and that may, I don't know the reason why, that might be in the fact that Fred was on the mower and Fred just thought he'd do a good deed and he'd cut it. But the new NEC 3 contract that we operate, and I put it in the report there, is audited, it's a very robust contract. So what happens is we make sure that we get what we pay for, but also we don't pay for what we haven't asked. And that's where the problem comes in, because if we haven't asked for it, we don't expect Ida Verde to do it, and Ida Verde aren't being paid for it, so Ida Verde now don't cut it. So it might have been Fred done it, it might have been a resident done it historically, but we only pay for what we ask. And that mapping layer we've got is what we ask. So if it's been missed and it's their fault, then we can get Ida Verde back really simply. Where a little bit more time comes in is where it's actually not mapped, and we take those individually. So what happens is we'll go out to site and we'll say, should it be cut? Is it even ours? And that's a lot of the issues is we get a lot of comments back and they're not our areas. And then, you know, should we be cutting it? If it's our areas, what should the frequency be? You know, what's the background to it? And we always try to take the priority as a local priority. So should it be cut, and the frequency of cut based upon what that local requirement is. But we also consider biodiversity and environmental. So it's not, I would say it's probably not missed. It's the fact that it's actually, for some reason, historically been maintained elsewhere, not under our contract, and that's been raised, and that's probably where the problem is, and we take those areas individually. If it's contract failure, then it's quite easy, but the vast majority of ones aren't contract failures. They're just not, and not in our mapping layer, never been in our mapping area. And it really goes back to the same as actually with regards to brambles. Again, back to frequency, we undertake in essence, maintenance, and not of bramble, but maintenance of hedges and shrubs once a year, because the grass cutters will cut the grass during the summer months, and then they'll go and cut the hedges and shrubs. So that's predominantly one cut. Now, it depends where the brambles are, and that's why I work with my colleague Chris over there, because if it's an encroachment onto the highway, reactive work might be undertaken. If it's actually at the edge of a amenity area, then it'll probably be left to the winter. So it depends where it is. And it also, again, comes back to the mapping again. It depends actually whether it's council responsibility and that mapping. And the layer I've talked about as well, it also shows all the area that my service is responsible for. So if you take relevant land, that will show you all the land that Wiltshire Council is responsible for. So if it's not on that relevant land on that mapping layer, then it's not ours. Obviously, we've mentioned about residents, and that does happen a lot because we cut, again, amenity grass monthly. Residents like their grass cut weekly. So Mary will go out there, she'll cut her grass weekly because we've got service areas that you goes garden, footway, and then you have a service area which is maintained by Wiltshire Council. Mary likes it always cuts the pavement weekly. Mary, obviously, whatever happens, for some reason or other, has to cease. And then what happens is it's actually probably more likely taken off of our layers because we haven't maintained it. And then it's a case of going back on there. So as was explained, we will go back and add it to the layers. But again, it's individual. So that question, is it ours? If it is ours, we will maintain it. And the maintenance is based upon what we feel is best for that. And in that case, they would almost always be a monthly cut, not a weekly cut. And that does also cause concern because Mary's used to cut weekly and we're now cutting monthly. So that's probably answering all those questions.
Okay, thank you. Right. Councillor Wheeler. Stuart. Sorry, Nick. Yeah.
I just wanted to build on a point that Adrian talked about, and it's particularly relevant where we have significant new housing developments, because there have been a number of questions raised with Adrian and myself about, you know, the maintenance of areas on new housing developments, and we see these, you know, all over the county. And where some of the difficulty lies is with what's the responsibility of the management company that are appointed by the developers. And then, of course, sitting within that is when the adoption of the estate takes place, both in terms of highways adoption, but there's always going to be elements of the verge that sits within the curtilage of us as a local authority and sits within the responsibility of the management company. And I think it's probably fair to say that we could probably be more helpful with local members and local parish councils in terms of explaining the adoption process, in terms of when the land is adopted and when it's adopted, what regime it's going to sit under in terms of cutting regime. So again, you know, we're very open to help local members, not just of this committee, but members across the whole of the county area, if they have any questions about the adoption of new estates and what the process is for making sure that, as Adrian said, there is an ability to go back and, in some cases, add cutting regimes to some of the areas that are on new estates.
Okay, thank you for that, and I experienced that at the time. Yeah, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two areas that I may or may not be talking to the right people. This is parochial, but you share in the grief. Are we talking here only about what I would call urban areas of grass and not roadside verges? Because what I am trying to understand is when we agreed the rewilding, and I won't want this point taken away, it may not be answered today. The road I live on, which is called Ram Alley, which runs from Eastern Royal to down towards the bridges, has not been cut this year at all. So therefore the bracken actually meets at the top end of the road. The advantage, of course, is that it slows down the more stupid van drivers. But I think Councillor Kunkler would agree that we have had no, apart from junction splays, no cutting done at all, as far as I can tell, on any rural road in the whole of my division. And that includes main roads as well, A roads, the main road to Hungerford. I would like an answer on where and when that should be done. And I know I used to complain when I had one tractor driver used to cut it 4 times a year because it was a lovely, easy little one. He whipped up, did it twice and charged you guys 4 times. The other one, in fact, Councillor Holt has just mentioned it. The issue of areas left when a development company has finished construction is, in one of my villages, an absolute nightmare, because it's not the roads and the verges, it's areas of empty land which are left. They did not set up a proper development company, management company to take on the open areas. As far as we can tell, the management company that is still the freeholder of those bits of land is either in liquidation or has disappeared. The parish council are accused of not looking after the village. The parish council are then informed by their insurers that if they went in and cut those bits of land, they will not be insured because they are trespassing, which is, as a lawyer, it's a ludicrous situation to be in. My off-the-record advice to the neighbours is go in and cut it. Then after 20 years, if you do it long enough, you'll own it. And you can acquire it by adverse, I can't remember, actually, maybe 14 these days, adverse possession. But that is an ongoing issue in a lot of villages, and I do think the council should take some counsel of it and maybe even look at compulsory acquisition of those areas, and then they could transfer them to the parish council, who could then cut them. Thank you.
It's got to be quick.
Add to that, because I've got a big piece in my patch, which is exactly that problem. Wiltshire Council cut it for years and years and years, and now they're not under the new contract, and the locals are upset. And certainly before COVID, possibly 8 years ago, I raised it with the parish council that this land was part of a sheet and it needs to be gone through the Crown estates to claim ownership. They didn't do it, and they're not wanting to do it now. So now the recommendation is to the people who live nearby, fence it, claim it as your own, and as long as nobody objects to it, you'll get it after 7 years. But actually, it's useful land for the parish. And it's land that this current parish council might not want it, but the next one might. So I think you're right, Stuart, that it should be down to Wiltshire to go along and take the ownership and then hand it over to the parishes.
What do you three decide on the answer on that one then?
Well, I think, Stuart, you've asked some specific questions which we'll have to come back to you on. I don't think it's probably sensible necessarily to take up the committee's time to give you a specific answer, but I will ask either Adrian or Chris Clark to respond specifically about that. I'm just going to respond to the general point, and the general point is, you know, if you believe there are, and other members who may be watching believe there are areas that form part of a development site for which planning permission has been given by us to build houses or whatever on it, and you feel that the developers are not fulfilling their planning obligations, and that's a matter to be taken forward with the planning enforcement team. And you know, Parvis is here, and Parvis oversees the planning area. I would not wish to comment about people going onto other people's lands and putting fences up and acquiring it. It's not appropriate for me so to do. But again, I reiterate the point I made earlier. If members of this committee, or indeed any member, feels that there is an element of open space which is not being looked after appropriately by the street scene team, bring it forward to Adrian, we will look at the geomapping, we will look at the land ownership and give you a very clear answer as to whether it's our responsibility to cut it, and also give you an answer on whose responsibility we think it is to cut if it is not Wiltshire Council's. And that's really all I can say on that matter, I'm afraid.
Okay, Councillor McClellan, you had your hand up next, then I'll go to you, Councillor Budden.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, without trying to be depressing, I'm concerned that we appear to be, as a council, becoming uncivilised, in that when I look at your budget savings and service implications on Appendix C, all I get the impression of is we're not doing stuff anymore. And you therefore ask the question, well, what's the purpose of Wiltshire Council if we're not going to keep the streets properly done? And I go down, allotment maintenance delegated to parishes, reduce cemetery grass cutting frequency. Well, that's not an improvement to anything, that's just not doing stuff. Reductions in pavement sweeping, so that's just leaving things dirtier for longer. Conversion of identified urban verge to wildflower, which translates from what I've seen in lots of areas to just let the grass grow longer. So you can't see on the roads when you're going round roundabouts and stuff. Review play areas without S106 funding really means just chuck it over to the parish or close it. Increased income from developer adoption fair dues. Cease external funding of street scene works, which I assume that means something's not going to get done or somebody else picks up the bill. Reduction in litter bin emptying. So you wait till it overflows, someone notices, and if you're lucky, reports it. Contract efficiencies introduced by the contractor to deliver to budget, only emptying litter bins when full, which means they overflow. And I think all of that adds up to Wiltshire Council no longer delivering what the public expect. And I would add into it weeds growing out of pavements that are just left nowadays, as well as the grass getting cut far less regularly than it used to in the villages. So, I don't want to be depressing, but it looks like we're just letting things go, as though we're getting, if you were a resident, just too old to do it yourself, so you leave it. Comments, I think. I just think it's sad.
All positive stuff there then, Councillor McClellan. Thank you very much. So we'll take this one, Adrian.
What you get as a councillor every day when you walk down the street.
I agree with you.
I think I will put a positive spin on this. Because obviously, yeah, what we've actually got here is, I think, again, and I try to capture this actually in the report itself, and it's been a bit in our discussions today. The contract about the NEC contract, it brings efficiencies on their own. So what happens is we ask in essence, the contractor to state to us how cost effectively can you do it? How much is that contract worth? So the contractor itself says, we will deliver your contract, say, for 3.6 million. And what the contract then does is if you spend over 3.6 million, for the true cost that it costs you over that, we are only going to pay you for the first 10%, 50% of that cost. And then as you go up, we'll only pay you 10%. So if you're spending, say, 3.6 million, if you spend 360,000, we're only paying you 180. You have to swallow that loss. And so what we did, and it was a learning exercise from the old contract I spoke about, was we paid a resource-based contract. So if Fred was employed 40 hours a week, we paid Fred 40 hours a week. This contract's completely different. We're saying if Fred can do the work for 35 hours or 30 hours, that's what you can say you can deliver. And if you go above that, we are not going to pay you. And that's what in essence, the £350,000 worth of efficiency savings in there is quite simply because we didn't pay them £350,000 of costs they incurred. So if it was 50%, that cost would be £700,000. We only paid them 300. So that is some of it. The other thing is with regards to litter bins, and I know it seems like we've cut back. So we got a contractor in a town centre emptying litter bins. And what he would do, go around there twice a day, and he'll empty the litter bins twice a day. Do they need to be emptied twice a day? Probably not. Probably once a day, because they're being emptied every day. But the contractor goes up there and empties them twice a day. So when we talk about the reduction in litter bins, that's the sort of thing we're talking about, or the fact we might be emptying 3 times a week, obviously. But what happens is the contractor has to take a photo, believe it or not. I can show you a photo of every little litter bin. How full is that litter bin when they come? And it might be the fact the emptying is based upon the summer when it's busy, and in the winter it's quiet. So when we talk about a reduction in winter litter bin emptying, that's what we're talking about. And now the systems we've got allows us to monitor that with evidence, so we can reduce the collections. External works, that's where we used to actually pay people to do rather than go through compulsory competitive tendering. What used to happen was under 25k, we used to pay local provider to do it. Now, Ida Verde are local providers, and they can actually go and use the same local provider. But if they use that local provider and go over the price they've quoted us, they'll be hit by those penalties. So we have stopped those direct contacts, and we now go through Ida Verde with all that efficiency savings. And so with regards to ourselves, play areas are in there, but you would have noted that hopefully that we've got £603,000 worth of funding available to town and parish councils to take on the play areas. You are right, we are looking to transfer those over, only because there's well over 1,000 play areas in Wiltshire, and I'm looking after about 30 of them at the moment in time. And so it's should we be providing, say, 30 play areas with the rest being funded by the local community? So we are trying to actually encourage those. And obviously this year we got the extra 603. Weeds in pavements is a very good point. We are actually at the moment, Tom, we're hopefully getting to the end of the weed treatment. So we are actually out there doing, again, an additional one-off funding, working with Chris's team there to do weed treatment. You are right again, delegated services does create savings. So where we give, I'm looking at the chairman here, Pewsey's taking it all on. It's really out there in the open domain. When Pewsey took it all on, all that saving was given to the council saving. Chippenham, Trowbridge, Westbury's going in actually on the 1st of January next year. Salisbury's gone. Pewsey. When they go out, we make financial savings. But myself and Mr. Gonzari were just talking about the lovely flower beds in Trowbridge. We haven't got a flower bed policy, actually. We haven't got a flower bed provision. But if you go down there and you'll see Trowbridge and they're putting them all in, it's not just about money, it's about what they can deliver to the local community. So, yes, we do make savings. But, in Salisbury, you talk about pavement sweeping, Salisbury do pavement sweep every single day. And service delegation does allow those enhanced services. So I know members may see it one way, but as an officer, I see it's a completely different way. And wildflower, and I must admit, we were on site the other day and we had a good old debate around maintenance and about should it be cut monthly or should it actually be cut a couple of times a year, picked up for wildflower. Well, for me as an officer, if it isn't used for playing, I would always recommend that it goes to an environmental cut for biodiversity and carbon. But taken on the need there with regards to the local community. They might want it cut weekly, monthly, with regards to making sure that it, is a visual improvement to the area. And we always take all those concerns on. And and we just talked about cemetery and the reduction in cutting in cemetery. There are things that we can do that saves carbon by naturally reducing the things that we do without any impact. So this year we've changed our way we deal with cemeteries. I'm absolutely positive we've received not one concern, not one comment about the current maintenance of our cemeteries in Wiltshire. However, I am looking to transfer those over to the town and parish councils. Again, we only had cemeteries in the Wester County. The other 3 areas, we haven't got cemeteries. So again, we've got a different provision in the Wester County. And again, I think I'm down to now 3, because when Westbury goes, the Westbury Cemetery goes. So again, we've got that maintenance level for 3 actually in Wiltshire, which I would be looking to find other homes for. But yeah, so there are some really true statements there, but I think that's a positive thing more than a negative thing as an officer. That's all I've got to say, really.
Okay, Ian, well done. I got Councillor Budden, Councillor, and you're next, and then. Okay.
Thank you for this report, and I appreciate the point just made about transferring services to other councils, which is passing the cost to other people as well. And I can see that that's the pressure coming down from shortage of cash generally, which is a topic Councillor Holder's talked to me about in other contexts as well. I was delighted to see in paragraph 24 that year-on-year carbon reductions with carbon neutrality by 2030 is up there in headlights as part of your contract with Street Scene. And I want to pay you a compliment, whereas the previous report we were discussing, I was having to point out that they hadn't got that in there. However, when I look for the evidence, I can't see it. Yeah, I really think this is very important. What you're saying to me, I think, is that you've taken it into account in the KPIs that are summarized in Appendix A. I really think this is so important that at a committee meeting like this, it would be appropriate for you to display a table setting out what the carbon emissions were last year, what they are this year, and where you're targeting them to be.
We can answer that specific question right now for you.
Thank you.
So yeah, what I diverted last year, and under the old contract, because obviously that was the last 12 months, they had 540 tonnes actually of scope 1 and scope 2. We put it in the notes here. Kieran, you notes 540 tonnes. Their outcome last year was 390. Scope 3, obviously, which was in essence their subbies, etc., their provision, their deliveries was 60 tonnes. They've got that down to 10 tonnes. So it's all tonnes. What in the contract, what they've done, and you'll see that it's got HVO, which is vegetable oil for transport. So they've tried to convert the vast majority to electric. That's all the hand tools, etc. Now that is a problem with regards to, in essence, our infrastructure within the depots and our infrastructure where they sit. So electrification of all the bidding contractors was not possible. So they've had to go to, in essence, vegetable oil for the larger kit. That does mean they've got a residue amount, I think it's 25 tonnes at the moment in time, we're sat there on scope 1 and scope 2 in 2030, which they're going to have to carbon offset either by, obviously, planting trees or buying credits. Vegetable oil is always a contentious one because, obviously, it is taking food source and there's a concern about HVO. But out of all the alternatives, because we haven't got green hydrogen, we haven't got the electric infrastructure at the moment in time, HVO was the only way that they could meet their requirements. So we are going to have about 25 tonnes sat in the, obviously in that tonnage in 2030, which we're going to have to address by carbon offsetting, planting trees or buying credits. But obviously that's the way it works out.
Well, let me say congratulations, and I'm pleased to see that you're on top of the numbers. That's really good. I would be delighted if you just add it as an addendum and show us the progress next year too. I think this is worth celebrating. They've clearly gone a long way.
Well done, team. There you go. Congratulations from Mr. Budden. Well done. Ian Wallace. No, not quite. Ian Wallace, and then it's Derek.
Yep.
Very, very quick question for me, and Adrian, you've just touched on some of what I wanted to ask anyway. Page 76, paragraph 20, you talk about the HVO and the fact that it was slightly more of a struggle for the contractor to meet the carbon targets because we didn't have the infrastructure in place. So the question is, are we looking at that for the depot strategy programme to put that infrastructure in place? And if so, what sort of timeline we'll be looking at that? Because it's about future-proofing, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously that's part of the depot programme, so you're 100% correct. We're running a little bit of the same actually with our own fleet, to be honest, in the depots. So in the current depot programme, yes, there is a move to electrification, because electrification obviously at the moment in time, until they get green hydrogen in, is probably the only way of actually hitting the carbon targets. It is a problem, and it's the same problem obviously Chris will face actually and Dave will face actually with the milestone contracts. So all of the contractors are relying on HVO. If you want me honest, the move to HVO was a contractor thing. That's why we penalised them, because HVO is just simply buying a tank, filling it full of vegetable oil and putting it in the engines. They had a slight hiccup with regards to manufacturers that they were buying from. Some of them wouldn't warranty the vehicles if they ran on vegetable oils, and that they had to get that resolved. So that resulted in a bit of delay, because until they got that sorted out, they couldn't really convert all their vehicles, because obviously you fill one tank up, it's got vegetable oil in it, you're not filling anything else up. But we are looking at electrification through the depot programme. The Melksham one has got electrification built into those costs, that 32 mil that you see actually in the depot programme. That's electrification. The north and the south business case are still proceeding. The south case is based upon, at the moment in time, that's got to come back as a business case, but that's all wrapped up around the carbon pledge about 2030, but there's a lot more work to do on the depot programme. We actually have got, although funding through the depot programme from Cabinet, we have got funding to deliver further electric vehicle charging points, not just actually in the depots, but in car parks. This is for workplace charging. So you will see electrification in car parks and in workspaces that we own, and the move to electrification that way as well. But the depots will give us the depots, if we can get electrification in, even in existing ones or the new ones, will give us obviously a good standing to move forward. But it's still a couple of years away, that.
Derek.
I would just like to make a statement and say my views chime entirely with yours over the one cut policy and so on, where and I have to say I'm highly disappointed that this week my lane was cut, and it's horrible. It's like seeing something that's been savaged. So I congratulate you on your approach to things. I think one of the confusions I have is over exactly where responsibilities lie for cuts. Now, I presume that when it comes to things like pedestrian splays, that really comes over to highways, yes? Right.
Yeah. And to be fair, what we did do, this is down to money. Historically, we actually tried to run one contract. So under the last contract, we merged the street scene contract with the highway contract. And I'll be quite honest, it didn't work. There are times that it does work, and that yearly cut does work. So you've got a tractor and a flail, you're fine. But as soon as you move into urban areas, you're talking about different kit, and it just did not work. So we did try, Environment Select Committee, we did try running it all as one, didn't work. So we divided it up, and that's why. And really the areas are based upon myself and Chris working together to find out where it didn't work. And so where it requires different kit, in essence, it comes to myself. So even our wildflower cut, we've got our own special kit for our wildflower cut, because obviously it's cut and collect. That's a twice a year cut, but it's obviously that's around encouraging, we cut obviously early in the year and later in the year to encourage that sort of flowery species. Some's cut 3 times a year to encourage obviously different species, and others is actually not cut at all for the native species. And I know there is a concern about brambles, but brambles, nettles and those sort of things have their place. So we tried to base all the cut around that. But that's the reason why we've ended up with the divide we have, is essence trial and error. Where it didn't work, myself and Chris back there, who'll come on in a second, work together about who sat in which service, and that's what our mapping's based on.
Councillor Wallace, no, done you, sorry, Councillor Palmer, sorry.
I'm a big fan of service delegation, and in Trowbridge, it's taken us a while to get everything right, but it's nice that the local town council's under control of that and can do quick changes, decide where conservation cuts are needed, etc. But one thing on the report, I couldn't distill out what savings have been made through service transfer. It were kind of efficiencies, and it was combined in other areas. It would be nice to see that as a fiscal separate line to over time how that's been affected. Another really minor point on page 105, the contract monitoring scorecards. There would seem to be a bit of an anomaly. Customer services and quality on there. There was an average score of 7.01, and then there's an average annual contract objective score, which was right down at 3.2. And I just wondered what that was about.
First of all, not a problem at all. I can get the savings because in essence they're published in the obviously when we do the service delegation. So I'll drag those up. No worries at all. We'll get those. Actually, we can get those to you. But they are public documents because most of the service delegation goes through as a council document, and it's stated actually in that overall bit. What I would say with your local hat on is. It's a different service, the Wiltshire Council service, as you said, to the town service. We've just been talking about flower beds and those sort of things. You do a different service, so don't compare my costs, my savings with your true costs. And the next thing that with regards to the tables saving, they are so really what there are many things that's based in there. So give you an example. Every month we sit down and we score their service. So what happens is it is things like, have they cut all the areas, have they emptied all the litter bins, and that is one of the scores. And there's many. There's about 12 different categories they score, and then the comments, and that's where the one category. The other one is really the annual one, where we sit down and we look at the carbon and we look at the finance. They've got to do things like provide us a financial plan, and that's their target. So every year. So the lower score one, sadly, will be those ones that is the more strategic one because they didn't deliver it to March or February at the end of the year. So we do score that accordingly, and that's where they get hit quite hard.
Yeah, the reason I picked up that was customer service, and we don't talk very much in the report about the customer.
And there's one of these really silly things with this contract, and I will, almost goes against so contractors. Ida Verde have done a fantastic, we work with them operationally, but community-wise, one thing they have dealt with, and we talk about customer contact, that's customer talking to them, but one thing I would say is their community side. I don't really know much about what they do with their community side, but that is unfunded. They pay that 100% in Wiltshire Council. They fund all that. So all those community events you see that Ida Verde do with ourselves, the school campaigns, that is part of our contract. It's part of their social value, so they had to provide that through the contract. But that is all part of them. So it was disappointing to see that. It was almost in a way a bit disappointing that we had to score them so harshly in some aspects. But we had to, even though you'll see actually on the POG and the POB data, they were actually achieving well over what was required, those strategic deliveries. So it was quite sad we had to score them that, but we have to. That's what it's all about. So that's why they received what they did do, and that's why obviously we also took £350,000 off them as well because of the efficiencies they didn't deliver.
Okay, I think I've done all the hands. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted, if I may, respond briefly to Ian's comments. Ian, I do understand what you're saying, but I would urge you to read Appendix F, which does actually list out all of the details in terms of what's been cut. And you talked about litter bins. 292,000 public litter bins emptied in the year, and as Adrian has said, what we have done is introduced a system whereby we only empty the bins that are the fullest, and we rely upon our contract with Ida Verde, as Adrian said, going round, and they do take photographs of bins. The bins will have some form of code on them that allow us actually to use the data to empty the bins that fill up the most often, and there will be bins across our network that frankly only need emptying once a fortnight, and we will only empty those once a fortnight. And that's about getting efficiency out of the contract, because there's no point sending a person to empty a bin if it's never full. So and I will defend that approach because I think that's the right approach under the contract. The other thing you touched on, and Adrian kind of skirted around it, is around the wildflower and conservation area grass cut. And, you know, I get probably as many comments, people saying we like the fact that it's left, as I do from people saying we wish it was cut. But, you know, we have a policy as a local authority to absolutely continue and, if need be, extend the wildflower areas across the county. We believe it's really important in terms of the carbon reduction by cutting less. We think it's really important in terms of our environmental approach to do that. What I will say is that we have, what I will say is we get quite a lot of complaints from people saying, well, there were no wildflowers growing in these areas. Actually, there are already native wildflowers growing in those areas, but unfortunately you have to be a little bit of an expert to understand what a native wildflower is compared to something that is seeded or plugged. But we do accept, you know, we're not resting on laurels, we do accept that we need to maybe enhance some of those wildflower areas. However, being very technical, bizarrely, wildflowers grow more effectively in nutrient deficient pieces of land. So we've been cutting those wildflower areas to take the nutrients out of the soil. We're now we're going to embark upon a trial approach later on this year, where we're going to start to seed some of those wildflower areas, put some plugs into those wildflower areas to accelerate the growth of flowers in those areas. Because I accept when you walk around them and people look at it and say all it is a mess, but actually it takes time to remove the nutrients. It takes time to degrade the quality of the soil to allow the wildflowers to grow and pollinate and increase. So we are aware of what the public is saying. We are committed to continue with the wildflower areas, but we are going to put an element of trial to accelerate some of them to look prettier than they actually do at the moment.
Okay.
Can I just thank both of them for their output, because it was a miserable set of things I said.
Jake, just very quickly.
Very briefly, Chairman, may I congratulate and express my appreciation for what I've just heard. I'm delighted to hear you're doing a wildflower seeding trial, and will you please set out clearly what you're doing and publicise it? That's really good news.
Right, we're very coming to the proposals. 3 years ago, I think we had a long, hot, dry summer, and the grass didn't grow anywhere for about 7 or 8 weeks, so we were well up on the thing. But we've had the last 2 years, we've had, I call it tropical summers. We've had rain, sun, and this causes the grass to grow at a higher rate than we anticipate and budget for. So I understand. Councillor Wheeler alluded early on about the farmer with the tractor cutting the hedges and the side roads. I mean, is that something we still have the farmers' agreements across the county where they cut their hedges and various things? I mean, it's something that was done many, many years ago, and it's something that we could look at. I do see them on the odd occasion on that one. And another thing I did, and Councillor was about the bins saying half empty. Was it back at Waitrose at Marlborough a few weeks ago, and someone was emptying their car and putting all the rubbish in one of the bins, and I couldn't get a photograph of them to see what they were doing. But there are opportunist people that will fill the bins up as they go. You have to be just aware of them. Anyway, I'll get an answer off you, Dave, someone else about the tractors cutting the banks and the hedges and that. Okay, all right. And proposals. A, to note the contents of the report and performance of the street scene and grounds maintenance contract in 2023-24, and B, to request an update on service provision to this committee in 12 months' time to include further information on the annual carbon emissions and reductions and service delegations savings. Okay, everybody going to be happy with that one? All in, have a proposal? And seconder, 1, 2, all in favour? Right, okay, well done. Thank you very much, and a great team. And we're going to take a 5-minute comfort break. We hit 2 hours, but we've got to change. Kieran's coming on. There's a change of Democratic officer on my right, so just give him 5 minutes. So 5-minute comfort break. We're now on 2 hours. We're in Fergie time now, so let's just give yourself a quick thing. Okay, if we can kick off again, please. Sorry, Jackie. Sorry, Nick. Okay, then, so we'll reopen again then with Kieran now in attendance. Item 8 is the Milestone Highways Term Maintenance Contract Year Performance 1. So as resolved at the Select Committee meeting on the 19th of September 2023, the committee had received an update on the Milestone contract, this being on pages 89 to 108 of the agenda pack. So Nick, Councillor Holder, it's another one for you and your team. So away you go.
Thank you, Chair. As members will know, this is an extremely detailed report here. I don't intend to run through huge amounts, other than just to remind members that Milestone took the contract over on the 1st of April last year from the previous incumbent Ringway. So this now is a report on their first full year of operation. We appreciated back in March of this year there was the wet weather and cold of the winter didn't help prior to the start of the contract, but we have significant meetings, regular meetings with senior Milestone staff to monitor the contract and review performance of the services, and we are able to also talk about the carbon reduction element and social value as detailed within the report. We continue to monitor their performance on a regular basis with senior officers and Milestone staff, and I'm going to hand over to Dave Thomas, who's the responsible for managing the assets across our highway network, to outline some comments he wants to make, and we'll do a double act and take questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So a little bit of detail, as Nick has set out, we're monitoring the performance of Milestone across a number of different aspects of the contract. We built a lot of information into the contract at tender stage, and the quality submission that was forthcoming from Milestone has laid the foundations for the way in which we monitor their performance. So a little bit of detail. Within the report, paragraph 16 sets out the contract objectives against which performance is measured. The first way in which we measure performance is through what is known as the satisfaction scores. So this is officers of the council scoring Milestone's performance using a set criteria. In return, Milestone score the performance of Wiltshire Council, and through our consultancy contract with Atkins staff also score us as Wiltshire Council and Milestone as well. So each month, over 100 staff involved within the delivery of highways are going and providing the satisfaction scores. The satisfaction score results are set out in Appendix A in a little bit more detail for you to have a look at. We then move on to the contract monitoring of KPI scores. Again, these are set out in detail in paragraphs 19, 20 and 21 of your report, and the table is included at Appendix B. As Nick has mentioned, we're also monitoring carbon reduction and social value. Both of these measures are assessed against the National Themes, Outcomes and Measures Framework, shortened to TOMS is how we refer to them. This is a large guidance booklet that comes up with lots of different ways in which carbon reduction and social value measures can be assessed. We've extracted those that we think are relevant to our contract. You can use the TOMS framework to assess all different types of work streams, not just highways, but across all actions that the councils undertake. But we've extracted those that are relevant to us. So the scoring for carbon reduction and social value is set out in appendices C and D of your papers. What we then do is that we combine the scores from the satisfaction scoring, the KPIs, the carbon reduction and the social value to give us an overall score. And Appendix E of your papers sets out how that has been done. And that has resulted in a score being achieved by Milestone of 8.16 out of 10 for their first year of their performance. The report also then goes on to cover activities that have taken place since last September with regard to gully emptying and pothole repair. With regard to gully emptying, it's probably worth highlighting that we have recently completed a substantive update of gully data, and we've transitioned all of that information across to a new database by a software supplier called CarbonTech. This development will allow us in the future to specifically target gullies that require emptying, but not emptying those that don't require emptying. So in a parallel way to the previous paper that you've just had from Adrian talking about the bins that need emptying, we would look to increase frequency of those gullies that do need emptying because they're filling up more quickly, where we would decrease the frequency of those that don't need emptying because they're not filling up with silt that frequently. It will take us a few years to get to that point, but we've made good strides towards that in the last few months. It's also worth noticing in Chris's area in the reactive service in terms of tanker operations, that with the availability of the increased highway investment funding, we have increased the number of tankers that are available for both reactive and routine activities, particularly when flooding events take place. Paragraph 41 onwards does set out the current performance in response to defects, of which potholes form part of that. We have done particularly well in the last few months in terms of pothole repair performance. The table set out at paragraph 41 does give you an indication of current response times to priority defects. We're doing particularly well on that at the moment. Through paragraph 45 and 46, we rehearse the additional investment in machines that we've taken on board to deal with pothole repairs. And then included in the appendices are some examples of Power BI dashboards that Milestone have developed that help us monitor the performance to the priority defects. Just as examples, work in progress, but this is the kind of technology that we're working with now. So I hope that gives you a very helpful overview. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that very much. No hands up, brilliant. That's it, we'll go home. Oh, nearly. I'll tell you what, Councillor Budden, I'm going to let you go first. I'm going to go that side, right.
Thank you for your report, and I accept and understand this is a very complex area and it's a very large contract. And may I say, I think there's some really good stuff in here. I particularly come back to a theme perhaps, I pick up on the issue of the carbon emissions reduction. Pleased to see that, and I'm pleased to see that you quantify that. Where is it? That's in Appendix F. The details are there. I'm grateful to you for giving us the detail. But what I can't see is, so what are the emissions? there's a reduction here, but from what to what? What are the residual emissions that we are still creating and they're still going into the atmosphere? I understand that you're focusing on the KPI that you're given to Milestone, but our residents want to know what are the emissions that we're still responsible for. I think it would be helpful if you gave us that. Can I make another relatively minor point, perhaps? I understand and appreciate that you as officers and many councillors are very familiar with the jargon, but I confess to being a novice in the area, and I don't know what a bobcat is, and I don't know what a velocity patcher is, and I don't know what a dragon patcher is, or what the distinction is that I ought to appreciate between these machines or what they do. A glossary would be very helpful. Maybe it's there somewhere, but I couldn't see it. I haven't got it to hand. And more importantly, what did you have before? So you've increased the amount of machinery online. That's good. I'm sure that's most important. But what was there before? How much of an increase is this? What percentage increase in your capacity does it represent? That doesn't jump out to me from this report. So let me also say that going on from that, there are two other relevant points to bring out. I don't see any comment on what we know is going on, and which is the elephant in the room, if you like, a huge increase in the expenditure, which was announced at the Cabinet and at the Council meeting a month or two ago, effectively amounting to as much as you've been spending on highways maintenance each year, effectively. And although I appreciate this report is all about what did Milestone do over the last year and how have they fulfilled their contract, I think it will be helpful for all of us to understand what is the impact on Milestone of that increased expenditure going forward, because the anxiety some of us have is that although the money is now there, we're not sure that the plans as set out are actually deliverable given the resources that are available. There's a load more I could ask for, but that's enough to be going on with. Thank you.
So I'll respond on a couple of those points, if I may, and then I'll defer to Dave and or Chris. Slightly tongue-in-cheek, but nonetheless serious. We have issued out to, through our comms team, a significant number of videos of the bobcats, the dragon patchers and others in operation. So what we can do is, if it's appropriate, is resend them to you personally, and I extend that offer out to all other members, because actually it's probably easier to understand what they do by watching them in action rather than a kind of one-dimensional explanation here from somebody who is not terribly technical to explain what they do. So we will send those out to you, and I would ask you, if I may, for all of you who have got those, to share those with your parish and town councils. Of course, one of the disadvantages of those, as we've mentioned, it's a slight disadvantage, is they require a little bit more of the highway to work on than maybe some of the more rudimentary approaches that we've used in the past. And you know, historically and unfortunately, we still sometimes have to send somebody along with a massive great hammer and a bit of cold fill to bang it down into a pothole to do an emergency repair. But we're trying to move away from that by using this new machinery to provide more long-lasting and more effective repairs over a greater area than just filling a hole. So we will get those over to you. But as I said, the slight disadvantage of the additional investment in the kit that we're using is we do have to, on some occasions, have to have longer network closures. But it does actually provide a more durable and long-lasting repair. And I'll pass over to Chris to see if you want to add anything to that.
I think what I would say is that in broad terms, looking at the resource availability, we didn't undertake the small element patching that is done by the Bobcat previously and under the previous contract. We are doing that now. There's 2 gangs operating on that. We did have a velocity type approach previously under the previous contract, but that was 1 single machine, and now we have 3 machines operating.
Okay, got all the answers in, Councillor Budden, to your questions? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. Councillor Waters.
Chairman, I didn't hear any comment on the impact of the additional spending, which was the elephant in the room, or Milestone's capability and capacity to deal with it and deliver the programme.
That's what I was, yes, yeah.
Yep, I'll pick that up, Chair. I think you need to recognise that not all of the additional funding that's been made available is being spent through the Milestone contract. We also have the machine surfacing contract with Tarmac and the surface dressing contract with Keeley Brothers. So it's not just all on the Milestone side of things. What we have been doing is working with Milestone to ensure that they do have sufficient resource in place to deal with the additional expenditure that is going through their their contract. Most of this is being absorbed by the use of additional subcontractor teams that are being brought in. I think one school of thought that we initially looked at with Milestone was asking them to take on more staff themselves. So they took on self-delivery of a lot of the additional work that we're giving to them. But the marketplace generally at the moment is very difficult for recruiting staff, fully trained staff, as it were, who can come in and start operating straight away. And there's also a significant lead-in time for buying new pieces of plant and machinery to allow works to be undertaken. So the quickest way for Milestone to react to the need to achieve additional expenditure that we were asking them to do was through subcontract basis. And so we have an array of subcontractors now working alongside Milestone to deliver the additional investment.
If I may, Chairman, I thank you for the response, which I think is quite clear. But what that implies is that there are 3 contracts. Brings to mind for me that we ought to be asking for a follow-up discussion, really not related to this agenda item, which is looking back at the Milestone contract as it stands, but we should request a report at some future date to see how the progress is going with all of those contracts that are involved in the additional expenditure.
Councillor Holder, Nick, would you be comfortable with that if we undertook that later on? Parvis, Nick?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure we could necessarily bring it to the next committee meeting, which is in November.
I think we can leave it to the beginning of the year. Councillor Budden, we can leave it to the beginning and give them a bit of time on that one. If you like.
6 months, I would have thought.
I think we can probably put it into the forward plan.
The important thing is to have a plan in place that is doable and to give us confidence that it is doable. Doesn't have to all have been delivered by then.
Well, we are, okay. I think the short answer is yes. We will do that just very quickly. We have a very, very clear plan for how we are addressing the C roads and unclassified roads, which form a significant part of the additional investment. It is being monitored on a regular basis, both by officers and by councillors. And I think we should be in a position to flesh some of that out and bring that forward as we go into the new year.
In the spring, yeah, it'll be fine. Okay. Councillor Waters.
Thank you. It's good to see the expenditure on the extra gully clearance machines, because as you've already highlighted, the flooding of roads and has probably caused a significant damage to the surface. basically, have we invested enough to start with? And I see that basically in order to, we've diverted staff to deal with potholes. So I'm interested in where they've been diverted from and whether or not that had an impact on other areas of highway maintenance. For example, I have a parochial issue about a set of railings on an island that have been out of commission for a year. So the question I'm asking really is do we think we've done, that the gully machines are sufficient to deal with the future issues, and so have we invested enough? And basically, where have we diverted our attention from, and is that impacting on other areas of our maintenance?
Okay, specifically about the gully emptying side of things and the additional machines, we've increased that reactive availability. Now, I think we have got to recognise that given weather patterns, we are never going to eliminate flooding completely, but those additional machines are making a significant impact on mitigating against that. We're also looking at a schedule whereby we are increasing the number of empties that we undertake within that schedule. Currently on the estate roads, we are emptying once every 3 years on a cycle. We are moving that to once every 2 years. On main roads, we are emptying annually. Where we have areas that we have identified as high risk, we are moving those from an annual empty to a twice yearly empty. So there's an awful lot of improvements going on which should mitigate against sort of flooding as such. But where we have these high impact storms, particularly wet winters, that is likely to create a problem ongoing. Looking at where resources have come from, now we have brought in, or a contractor has brought in additional resources. The fact that there are large numbers of potholes, that does provide us with a burden on tasking our technicians and engineers to inspect and instruct work, and that does impact on other areas. I think specifically the issue you're talking about is at Whitehall Garden Centre, and one of the problems we have there is fitting that in because the work needs to be undertaken under a closure. It's my understanding of that situation there, and that's why it hasn't happened as quickly as what it should have.
Absolutely. However, the road has been closed a couple of occasions in only the last couple of months for other purposes. And I'm wondering whether or not we bundle activities together to reduce the amount of road closure.
Yeah, we absolutely do. For instance, where we undertake lane closures on the A350 north of Chippenham to undertake the grass cutting, we include the gully emptying as part of that. We also have included sign works and pick up any defects that we can at that time. Other closures on the A360, for instance, where the closure from sort of Salisbury heading north up to the A303 took place, we included a significant amount of patching works along with drainage works along there to make use of that closure. So we do look to combine works where possible. It's not always possible though.
Understood, but the point being made was where have we taken the resources from, and has that had an impact? So for example, that particular issue over a set of railings and so on, which has been out for about a year, is that something that has basically, had to take a hit?
not because of resources. The problem has been procuring. It's a set of VisiRail pedestrian barrier, and there has been some issues getting that material brought in. Probably that's something that we would need to look at as far as a process is concerned to improve on that, but it's not a resourcing issue.
Okay, so yeah, well, when you relate to road closures and roadworks, I think Marlborough's the capital of roadworks and road closures. It seems to be always in Marlborough. And it's not only Wiltshire Council, it's all the other services that all come in at the same time. Councillor Wallace and then Councillor Lay.
I would challenge your Marlborough statement there with devisers, Chair. So I actually don't have a question. I just have a couple of bits of positive feedback, because I think that this is a subject which probably everyone in this room gets most negative communication about, and particularly around gullies. There was a particular gully on the A342 Nursteed Road, which I brought to this committee a couple of times when Chris has spoken on this subject. And for the 15 years that I've lived there, I don't think it had been cleared, and it flooded and got me wet every time I was going to town council meetings. That is now clear, as are a lot of other gullies in Devizes. And that's certainly, although we're not at risk as flooding as other communities, that has made a big difference for the road flooding. So thank you for that. And the other point was the pothole repairs, and it has been noticeably better, particularly in my division and the divisions around it, to the point where the constant every couple of days negative posts on social media saying there's potholes everywhere in Wiltshire, when are these going to be repaired, that has completely switched now. And in my division, the posts are, I reported this pothole and it has been repaired within 24 hours. And that is really coming forward. So thank you for that as well. And also just to thank you for the communication around some of the big issues on the A361 and the other issues in my division. The only thing I would ask is if there is a way of being more proactive on some of the roadworks and interventions that the teams are doing, contacting the division members when there's going to be particular issues like we recently had in Victoria Road, that would be much appreciated, so that when we are contacted, we're able to respond to residents. But otherwise, thank you.
So I'd like to respond specifically to you, Chair, about the issues you just mentioned there in Marlborough and others commented on. We have actually had significant amounts of, and it picks up your point, Ian, we have had significant amount of correspondence with the local members in Marlborough, those two members, and they have had emails backwards and forwards, and we've responded appropriately to them. I suppose maybe the learning is we could share that more widely with other members who might drive through those divisions. But, you know, it's not really, I'm going to be maybe slightly negative here. We do try to communicate with local members, but in honesty, in all honesty, if we have an issue in Marlborough, we are going to communicate with the Marlborough members. We're not necessarily going to communicate with the people up in Pewsey or the people down in Carn and Chippenham. We just don't have, the officers just don't have the ability to do that level of communication, I'm afraid. It might not be what you want to hear, but that is, you know, I'm not going to ask these guys to check through a map of who they need to communicate with, provided we've spoken to the local members who were most directly affected. To your point, Ian, we are absolutely trying to make sure that we are communicating with members when work is taking place. There are, of course, instances of the work takes place on the highway that is done by some of the utility companies that we are not necessarily aware of, even though we've issued permits. We've had a number of situations recently with Openreach who have been given permits to do work, and they pitch up, put up traffic lights and bugger off and don't do anything for 10 days. And in one instance, we actually revoked the permit and made them take the traffic lights down. But we are reliant upon local members and members of the public to tell us when that happens. And we welcome that, and we will deal with it as and when we can. But I think it's, I don't know, you know, I remember sitting here 6 months ago and said, one of the things that I was hopeful would happen under my tenure is that we would improve communication, both with local members and with our local residents. And I think, and you might say, well, of course you'll say that, Nick, because you're sitting in the seat, but I think that the communication to our members is better. I think the Highways newsletter that we're sending out is better. I think some of the social media posts that we're sending out, notwithstanding the fact that Councillor Bunn didn't see the very exciting videos showing the Dragon Patcher and the Bobcat in operation, have been much more effective. There is more to do. We absolutely understand that communication is really important, and I'll take that point on board. I talk to these guys and Adrian when he's here all the time about, have we spoken to the local members? What have we done about it? Have we spoken to the parish councils? Have we spoken to the town councils? But, you know, it's work in progress, but I think it's better than it was.
To be fair, Nick, I was only jesting about Marlborough. I do sit on Marlborough notice board, and I think Councillor Wheeler's the same when they go into the Marlborough, that Cadley way, people are always backing up. But if you go in the
Just
right...
wish I could afford to drive to Marlborough and shop at Waitrose, but I can't.
I have to go to bank in Marlborough because I haven't got a bank in Pewsey. But anyway, in fairness, it's just, yeah, it's just one of those things. You go at the right time of day, you don't have to meet the traffic. Sorry, Stuart, I got Jackie, how many questions you got? Because before we... Three, because I've got to remember as well. Yeah, okay.
I was going to say most of my things I write down are more like comments, because obviously as I'm reading the report,
I would love you to ask questions if you can.
come.
Better, please.
Yeah. So, but you mentioned about how you do your scoring, and the officers obviously are scoring 8.16, I think you said. And I just wondered, first of all, are you happy with that score? Is that a good score? But also, what is the public perception? And I'm sure if we went out and asked the public, we'd probably get all sorts of comments. But the way we can work the scoring out from the public is how often they report a particular defect and how long it takes to get repaired. And one of the things that I've spent my life in the last few years is explaining to people, you've got to report the potholes. It's no good telling me I don't have a Bobcat in my garage and a pile of tarmac, so I can't repair it. So don't report it to me, go to the council. I saw in the report, 4,000 reports for potholes compared to 600-700 which you normally would have, just shows you the problem that we all had. A bit worried about this 15 million, page 53, you talk about 15 million is the annual expenditure. Doesn't seem an awful lot of money to me, bearing in mind how much we know how much it costs to do highways. So I'm just wondering if that is sufficient. The other thing is that people say to me, they repaired the pothole there, but they didn't repair that one. And yet you say in the report that you have engineers go out first of all to assess a report to see whether it does need doing. So are they looking around at the other ones in the area to say, well, actually, the public might have reported that one, but I actually saw 3 others that ought to be dealt with at the same time. And the other thing is the emptying of gullies. I noticed with my gullies, and when I was doing the judging for the best kept villages, I was also looking down gullies in other villages, that sumps tend to be full. And therefore it's important they're emptied, because they are the bits that collect up all the rubbish so that the water can flow through the pipes. So are we keeping a record of where we do have risky gullies that cause flooding? I know I have 2 in my area that regularly cause flooding if they're not cleaned out, and I'm told they're not on a list anywhere, and it's up to the parish to bring that up. I would have thought it's up to Highways to know that they've got a problematic gully or culvert, and it needs to be on our list, not relying on local knowledge for us to keep it clean, so we don't get flooding in the first place. That was about it. I wondered how much insurance claims we've had. And touching on Nick's point, I'm sworn to secrecy, so I can't say too much. But yes, as a local member, because I've kept records of when a certain utility company came out and took the photographs, that's been used to pursue the situation. I can't say any more than that.
Thank you, Jackie.
So I'll respond on one of your points. Your point about is £15 million enough? Well, the answer is that's all we've got. Because we are reliant in the main, as I say, on a regular basis, on settlements from central government. And central government, in round terms, allocate for the whole of the highways activity, so that about £20 million a year. We are in year 3 of a 3-year settlement. That was increased slightly by the previous government before the election by just over £5 million from the cancellation of the HS2 project. We had a conversation with Councillor Budden yesterday about it in a separate meeting. When that extra settlement was announced by the previous government, it was suggested that that would be the first of a 10-year enhancement to the £20 million. We don't know whether that's going to be the case. But I think more importantly, our biggest concern is not yet understanding what's going to come out of the autumn statement this year in terms of what the 3-year settlement is going to be. So we have no guarantee that that 15 million will be replicated next year and in future years. And of course, what we could get for £20 million 2 years ago, we can't get the same amount of stuff done for £20 million this year because of what's happened with contract price inflation in terms of material inflation, etc., etc. Which is why, I do genuinely believe that it's been helpful to our residents that this year, this council, like some others, but not all, have been able to find additional funding over and above the central settlement. But whether that will continue at that same level in future years is to be had in the future. I'll let officers answer the other questions, Jackie.
Right. With regards to when we undertake inspections, yes, we do look at the area as a whole. We don't just look at what has been reported. We do try to combine the works that are being undertaken. The challenge is, though, that it's how far you go with that work. There are sometimes that it's very obvious that there's something that needs to be done, just sort of perhaps a few yards away. But potentially the extent of works could just extend and extend beyond what we've got budgeted for that site. So we have to take a engineering decision on what can be done at that type of location. With regards to sort of gullies and how we're managing those, Dave mentioned the carbon tax system. That's going to enable us to be much more intelligent on how we direct things as far as recording the information on what locations have been emptied and what levels of silt have been found in the sort of gully pots. Just picking up on what you're saying about looking down gullies and seeing that they're full. Yes, if there's silt in them, then they need to be addressed. Simply because there's water in the bottom of the gully pot, that is how they're designed to work. They're designed to have a trap in them, and that water then is one that prevents hydrocarbons, oils getting out into the system. So yes, if you can see solid material in them, they probably need to be emptied. But if it's simply that there's a level of water in the bottom of the base of it, then they're probably functioning correctly.
I was just going to add a little bit to what Chris has said, in that where a pothole is reported and inspected, if, for example, it's classified as a P1 pothole, which requires repair by the end of the next working day, it's normally filled with a cold applied material. There may be other defects around that particular pothole, but because of the requirements in the inspection manual to fill within, in effect, 24 hours, that work has to be done in isolation. What we've moved to with having the Bobcat machines is that where other defects are around a pothole that has been repaired, those can be noted and fed back into the planned Bobcat programme. As Chris mentioned a little earlier, the Bobcat works are very successful in delivering a much larger patch area, but because of the size of the machine, we often need temporary road closures to do that. And so the Bobcat operations come in a planned programme rather than the P1 filling the potholes, which is very much a reactive programme. So the two work hand in hand, side by side.
Okay, right. So I've got two Stuarts. I've got Stuart Wheeler and then Stuart Palman. Okay, I'll do that way, right to left. Okay, definitely next Stuart.
Thank you. Couple of things. First of all, we're always told, or I always told my villagers, you have to report the a pothole or any defect on the Wiltshire app. Is it now repaired, up and running and fully functional? Because you remember we had a lot of problems with the Wiltshire app when you'd report a pothole and they would come back and say problem fixed, and the parishioner would ring you up indignantly saying it said problem fixed, it's got deeper. Has that actually been dealt with now? It was being rolled out, when we were told, I think 6 months ago.
Work is ongoing on that. The programme for the first drop, I think is the term, of the new app, as it were, is supposed to be the end of September. So that should address a number of those issues that you've had where people have reported things.
So that's fingers crossed there then, is it?
I rely on my colleagues in the IT department.
But that's underway, end of September.
Yeah.
Now,
Sorry, Stuart, just, we had an update from Ashley yesterday, because obviously my Wilt sits under IT, and he's in essence said exactly the same thing.
It is coming, and
it's
ready.
It's taken slightly longer, because it's not just about updating the functionality of the app itself. What we're trying to do, what we are going to do, is to have it linked into the HIAM system.
Right.
So we're able to actually not just
everything's talking to each other.
Not just interrogate my Wilts app as a separate piece of functionality, but see how it links in. And then the intention, once it's working and links, is we then share that with local members and area boards with like a kind of progress report, so people can see how things are reported. I completely understand the frustration. It is massively frustrating when people report things, and because they are the second or third person to report it, it comes back with a response that says issue closed. And that is, if you like, one of the things front and centre to make sure that, if you are the second or third person reporting it, you actually get told you are the second or third person. We already know here's the activity number.
My next question, I assume, like anything, if you're maintaining your house, the sooner you can identify a deterioration in the road surface before a major pothole forms, the easier and better it is to fix it. I think I read somewhere that some councils have actually equipped their council vehicles, dust trucks and things like that, with cameras that automatically inspect the road surface as they proceed over it. And by definition, you proceed over probably almost every mile. You proceed over all the major roads anyway. And that would then give you an ongoing information source on areas to look out for, so you can fix them before it turns into a claim. I'm just wondering, it's a question, is anything being done along those lines to allow early intelligence of areas and things being done? Let me finish everything I'm going to say and then we can answer. Gully emptying, I assume that your new schedules twice monthly or whatever they are, every 2 months rather than 3 months, things like that. Given the computer age we're in, they are capable of being varied to reflect the actual experience on that gully over time. Arising from that, it does strike me that if you have a gully that is constantly requiring emptying, do you then have the ability to say, that is not, the gully's fine, but is it being caused by a block drain? I have one in one of my villages
which we know you can empty the gully until you're blue in the face, because the next rainstorm, the drain that goes away from that gully is actually collapsed under the road surface. So all it does is fill up. You can empty the gully, goes down about 4 foot, take it out, it'll fill up. Next rainstorm, it'll fill up. And also, does that indicate you might have a situation where the adjoining landowners have not properly, I'm talking about rural gullies now in small streets, where they have not properly cleared their ditches, in other words, the ditches meant to take the water away, and that there's a procedure whereby they are required to do what they are meant to do, which is keep their ditches clear. And the final one is, I share your pain about contractors having suffered from a plague of GigaClear in virtually every village in my division, who seem to be totally incapable of recovering a road surface in a fit manner. Is there any method whereby if you have, how can I put it, a contractor who has a history of not being terribly efficient, that he is actually asked or required to put up money in advance, which is held to ensure that is only released when the road has been repaired to your satisfaction? And I assume it has to last for what, 4 years, 5 years? What is the standard you expect a contractor to leave the road surface in? Thank you.
Let me go in reverse order. Let's see if I can pick up that the last point you made probably more easily. Utility companies have a statutory right to install and maintain their apparatus in the public highway. We can't stop them from doing that. Where new utility apparatus is being installed, they have to apply to us for a permit to undertake that work, so they get a road space booking. They have to comply with the conditions on that permit in terms of how long it's going to take, their operational hours, their temporary traffic management. That's all agreed. The reinstatements that they do in the carriageway they have to reinstate to standards that are agreed at a national level. We inspect their reinstatements against those national standards. Where they fail to meet those standards, we are able to get those utility companies back to reinstate and make sure that they are up to a sufficient standard. Where a utility company doesn't perform, we are allowed to step in and undertake the reinstatement ourselves and recharge the utility company. They are allowed to do a form of temporary reinstatement that can last for up to 6 months before they have to come in and do a permanent reinstatement. There's an awful lot of national policies around all of this, and a lot of things that I don't profess to be an expert in. That's why I have a team of staff that are expert in it, and we hold utility companies to account. Where we have repeated failures by a utility company, we will invite them in for a meeting, and we will then not issue them with permits to allow them to do any new installs until we are satisfied that they are actually resourced and capable of doing the work in the correct manner. So there's an awful lot of work that goes on in dealing with utility companies to make sure that they are performing correctly.
Any particular utility companies you have to with, or is it?
Over a period of time, I have to say that we have had difficulties with virtually every utility, but the major concerns that we have at the moment are around the telecoms sector and the GigaClears and those, like, because of the way they employ their subcontractors to do the work. The onus is on the subcontractor in doing as much work in as little time as possible, and quality standards then slip. So, but yes, you can be assured that there's a whole team working on actions.
Right. Looking at the topic you brought up of video, footage and the use of that. We do utilise that already. Our scanner surveys, which are undertaken by a third party, goes across the network, and that provides us with data relating to the condition of the carriageway. So that's like a scheduled approach to recording the information. You touched upon the use of waste freighters and putting videos on them. We did take part in that trial with a company called Geist. At that time, one of the issues was handling the volume of data that would be sort of provided. So that in itself was never taken forward as such. However, at the current time, we do utilise a piece of software when our technicians are undertaking their scheduled safety inspections, whereby it videos the inspection and through some whizzy artificial intelligence is able to identify defects. So we are pursuing it. It's not a finished product as such yet, but we are looking at how that can assist us.
Yes, so I'll pick up on the extra work over and above the gully emptying. So we have, through the flood working groups, already invited parish and town councils to put forward areas that are known to flood, and we already have a substantial list of locations where concerns have been raised. They're often down to blocked pipework or landowners not clearing ditches. We have a process in place where at the moment we ask the parish and town councils to do first level engagement with landowners to try and encourage them to take their responsibilities seriously. If the landowner doesn't react and take action, then we as Wiltshire Council will step in with some legally supported instruction to them to undertake their work. If ultimately the landowner refuses to do anything, then we do have the powers to enter land and undertake the work and then recharge the landowner for that. One of the things that I want to develop moving forward is that where we have persistent gully failures in terms of gullies becoming blocked due to downstream blockages, either in the pipework itself being blocked or the pipework running at capacity, so it just can't take any more, we would then move that into a drainage improvement programme of work that would then involve more substantive engineering measures to possibly take out a small pipe and put a big pipe in to increase capacity. That's something for the future. We have some additional funding available to allow that to happen at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Palmer, it's 1:30 and we've got to be out of this room by just after 2 o'clock because there's a meeting again, so we're going to have to speed it up a little bit. So I'm sorry about that, but time is the essence. Right, Councillor Palmer.
Quickly, positive feedback in terms of road closures in Trowbridge for future High Street and so on. The local council has been kept very well up to date, especially on slips and how that's progressing, has been able to act as a good buffer with the public in terms of giving them rationale for why things are as they are and the benefits they're going to receive and so on. So that's very good. On the gully front, here in Trowbridge at the end of last year, we were asked which gullies are causing issues in Trowbridge through the parish council, saying that a tanker would be there for a week and would help sort out all these issues. And all the councillors contacted all their residents and managed to put an absolutely huge list of block gullies and provide that to the parish council who provided it on. And then essentially we didn't see any tankers. All those gullies are still blocked, and because we'd all gone to the public and asked them for their inputs, and then they don't see the action public, we lost credibility on that front. So I think I like the idea of the intention to publish a detailed programme of gullying, emptying, and which roads are going to be done when. That would be absolutely great. But at the moment, we've got a credibility gap on that front.
With regards to sort of gully emptying, I think what you're probably referring to there is what we call discretionary gully emptying service. That is a service which is supported via our in-house sewer crews. We've got 2 machines, and there is some spare capacity with those 2 machines, which we utilise to put at the disposal of parish and town councils to deal with issues that are of particular concern to them, that perhaps don't rank as highly on our list of flooding issues, for which we would deploy our VACTOR teams onto. The difficulty is there has been some outages of staff, which has reduced our ability to deliver that service. I'm sorry to hear that you weren't kept up to speed with what was going on there, and that's something that we'll need to go away and look at. But having said that, with regards to the additional resources, giving it a enhanced schedule of emptying, I would anticipate a number of those problems will be addressed as part of that as well.
Councillor McClellan.
Thank you. 2 quick points. Going on from the utility replacement fill-ins, where there is a special service, and I'm talking about like a non-slip service, and a contractor comes along or utility comes along and digs a big hole and then fills it in with tarmac, are we expecting the long term to be a restored non-slip service, or do we allow black tarmac across what was a specialist service? That's the first point. The second point is, I get a lot of questions from road servicing where it's not a pothole, but there's a general, so if you could drive along, you think, yeah, road's a bit rough, but it's okay to drive along. But cyclists are repeatedly saying it's rough around the edges, councillor, so that when we're riding our bike, you're going up and down, non-surfacey bits, surface, non-surfacey bits where it's eroded. Have we got ways of overcoming that, or do we just live with cyclists complaining?
In terms of reinstatements, as I mentioned earlier, where a utility company does a reinstatement, they are allowed to put what's known as an interim reinstatement, which is a blacktop, but within 12 months they have to come back and reinstate to match the existing surface. So if there is an enhanced surface level, it's often proved challenging, particularly when there are small areas that require a high value type of reinstatement. There are some particular known areas around the county where we've battled for a long time with utilities, and in fact there is one particular location at the moment where we have decided that enough is enough, and we are going to go and do the reinstatement ourselves, as I mentioned a little earlier, and we will be recharging the utility companies for that, because it's taken too long to get to that stage. In terms of surfacing for cyclists, we don't provide specific smooth surfaces for cyclists. They're part of the general traffic on the public highway. We can address that when we do full resurfacing activity, hopefully, but obviously there's a limit to what we can do with the budget that we have available. Cyclists could go anywhere across the whole network. We have 2,800 miles worth of road network across Wiltshire. We'd like to resurface it all. It would cost us 500 billion to do that. We have nowhere near that amount of money available to us.
So it's a 2-year project?
Yeah.
2 years. Dick, you've got a very quick question, so I'm going to move
Very
this.
briefly, Chairman, thank you. Dave Thomas, in his reply to an earlier question, referred to what the council can do if a landowner fails to carry out work on his land. I would refer you back to our meeting back in March when the Director for Highways was present, and prompted by something that you, Chairman, said, I asked for a briefing on what we can do as a council if runoff from a landowner, from an adjacent landowner, is causing damage to the road. The reason for me asking that question at that time was that the local highways engineer that I had had contact with was very reluctant to take action. It would be helpful if there was a briefing note, and as I say, the director volunteered to produce a briefing note for us, and what she said was a legally contentious area. But I think if you could produce some briefing note to describe to us what can be done, how it can be done, what we need to do to trigger it, that would be helpful for all of us.
Yeah, I'll pick that up with the director once she's back.
Okay, so we've got some recommendations then, so no more questions. A, to note the contents of the report and progress and methodologies being used to assess performance, carbon reduction and social value. B, request a further update to this committee on completion of the second year of the contract. And C, to request a separate report regarding the future spend and impact of the increased funding for highways by spring 2025. Okay, I have a proposal for that. Councillor Budden and a seconder of Councillor Waters. All in favour? Great, all in favour. Time is 2. Right, next one, 1338. 9, update on the maintenance and management of the public rights of way. Nick, it's still you, I'm afraid. Hopefully it won't take us long, but I know that wait, who's dealing with this one?
I'm going to defer straight. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to defer straight over to Chris to pick up any, to take me through it and then pick up any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. In the sort of being very mindful of time, I won't give you a great big spiel about rights of way. What I would say is that we're blessed within Wiltshire to have a wonderful landscape, and the public rights of way network is a means by which people can enjoy that. We're very conscious of what needs to be done there. There has been some adverse publicity around what Wiltshire does with regards to rights of way, but there are measures in place to take that forward, and I'd hope that within the report that will enable you to see some of the background to what's going on and the issues that there are for the teams that are employed on dealing with that work. So I'm open to questions.
So, Councillor Jackson, this is something you raised originally, if you remember rightly. Is there any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, you're quite right. I did. And my question really goes to the capacity that you have in order to come up with and complete the definitive map, the definitive plan. I have heard that if someone claims a right of way, that there is a statutory 12 months in which that claim must be either denied or satisfied. Can you comment on that, please? Thanks.
Right. With regards to definitive map modification orders, it is a legal process that we go through in relation to that. What can happen, I think this is what you're talking about, is a applicant can apply to the sort of PINS, the Planning Inspectorate, to actually get a application determined and an order made, and they can then impose upon us as the surveying authority, Wiltshire Council, a 12-month timeline for doing that. Effectively, what that means is that particular modification order goes to the top, and we will then go through processing it. But I can't emphasise enough, it is a national issue. Many other highway authorities, surveying authorities are in exactly the same position with a large backlog of definitive modification orders to deal with. We are looking at how we can perhaps streamline the process to address that, but even having said that, I don't think without intervention from national government and a change of approach there, we are going to be in a position to progress those things much quicker.
Okay, if I may, Chairman. Chris, thank you very much. When you say we're looking at, is that something that Wiltshire is looking at, or are other local authorities doing the same thing? Thanks.
As I say, it is a national issue, and other local authorities are looking at it independently. We are looking at it also independently, but we are engaging with adjoining authorities, other authorities in sort of the South West Highways Alliance, to look at how they're dealing with things, to see if there's any lessons learned that we can come up with. Got a meeting towards the end of September, it should be, with my colleague over in Oxfordshire, and they've approached things in a slightly different way. And we're looking at if we can learn anything from the way they've done things to perhaps improve the processing of these orders.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Yes, the comment on the legal that says byways, footpaths, roads used as public paths, all the rest of it is clouded in precedent and is exceptionally complex. Having sat on Eastern Planning, where we get a 40-page report on about a mile of potential footpath. My question is slightly different. You talk about the importance of footpaths and byways. I'm very aware, from having had this problem with a byway in one of my villages, it is actually used, has houses fronting onto it, with elderly residents in those houses, and large potholes which have remained untouched for 18 months. And being told by the officer responsible for that area that, yes, he'd love to do something, but didn't have any funds. He was not able, he had no scalpings, he couldn't access scalpings, he couldn't get them laid. And what I want to know is there a proper budget for this, or has this now been mixed up in, because I remember, and my memory now goes back far too far, but when I was first elected along with the chairman to this council, that actually we had quite an active footpaths, byways people who were engaged themselves in putting in gates and access and doing all sorts of work. And I believe that team has gone. And I know that we're relying through the area boards on granting money to footpath groups, and they're doing excellent work in some areas, supported, I believe, by the people. But what I want to know is there actually a budget for this?
Yes, there is a budget. I think what we've got to look at, though, is where a byway is a byway, it's quite straightforward as far as the level of maintenance is concerned for it. It's in keeping with the traffic that would use that. Where you do have situations in the one in your location is not the only one. There are other sections of byway that have residential properties accessed off of them. The level of maintenance that's provided is in keeping with a byway rather than a carriageway that would be a UC road, for instance, and that can provide us with challenges. Looking at how we resource that up, we do have 6 countryside access officers, but there's 6,000 kilometres of network, and it would be nice to deal with things more completely across the network. But that level of resource that we have available is limited, is finite, and it does cause us some challenges as far as maintaining what is an exceedingly large network. And hence that's why we do get some of those issues, particularly in areas where there's a boundary between urban or semi-urban areas and the countryside.
Councillor Bedden?
Chairman, thank you. Picking up on some of that and drawing your attention to paragraphs 11, 12 and 14, I note you refer to the fact that there are 6 volunteer groups actively working on rights-of-way projects, and one of those is very active in my area. They play a very important role in maintaining footpaths and rights-of-way. What I don't get a feel for in this report is how much of Wiltshire's footpath network is maintained by volunteer groups. How much are we actually spending manpower, time and money on ourselves as a council? How dependent are we on volunteer groups? What are we doing to promote them, to recruit more volunteer groups, put them in place elsewhere? In other words, there's no program here set out. Now, it may be that you're saying this is something that's emerging and evolving, but I put it to you that encouraging volunteer groups should be a strategic goal, because that's the only way we're going to avoid significant cost ourselves. And if it is a strategic goal, then it would be a good idea to quantify how much they're doing, how much they did last year, and how much we would hope they would be able to do in future years. And following on from that, I make one other observation. The group in my area, and picking up on some of the things that you've said in here, that there are risks associated with working through volunteer groups, and there are issues to do with health and safety. In my particular area, the feedback I got from my volunteer group was that they have had great difficulty. In fact, they've been unable to get any clarity from the council as to what the insurance cover is for them when carrying out work on our footpaths. So I think that's an issue which needs to be addressed from our side and from their side, and I'd be grateful for your response.
All right, okay. Firstly, what I would say is that volunteers within the Countryside Access service area are a vital ingredient in providing the service, but they are not a panacea to deal with all of our issues. There are certain things that they are able to do, and there are certain things that they are challenged on. With regards to trying to drive this forward, what we're looking to do is engage parish councils, because parish councils do have powers vested in them that they can exercise in relation to rights-of-way maintenance. There is a cluster of parishes around Warminster where that works very well. We have a volunteer coordinator down there who's undertaken an awful lot of work, I would say semi-independently of our access officers, with their guidance and assistance to a point, but the group have the wherewithal to get to locations, erect signs and this type of thing, and install stiles and gates. So they're quite independent, but there are other groups that are more along the lines of doing some light trimming, as it were, to rights of way. So what we're trying to do is get to a stage where we're using the parish councils as the sort of model to deliver these services through. That also addresses the insurance issue, because it would then be done under the parish council's insurance. Where we do have some problems, though, is the group and the sort of appendix that shows the work that particular group is undertaken is very much facilitated. They do some great things. It's very much facilitated by our Countryside Access officers. They provide the kit, the vehicles, what have you, to get to site and deliver that service. Which in itself, we do have some problems, because we've got those access officers that need to do some of the administration around enforcement and that type of thing, where there are issues that need to be addressed. they're actually doing the practical side as well. So we're trying to come to a conclusion on how best to deliver that area of service by using volunteers in the areas that they're best able to achieve sort of positive outcomes.
Jackie, you're next up. Time's ticking.
Yeah,
so-
I'll try and be quick. I mean,
Question.
I think that this particular report is very important, and it's a shame we don't have time to discuss it. And I think perhaps we need to come back at 6 months, whatever, to go through more detail. Because I don't think 6 officers is enough to cover all of Wiltshire. And I think we need to be talking about that. Insurance for volunteers was something that I wanted to ask about. And, you know, we hear in this report how important our rights of way are and how important they are for our health and everything else. And yet we're constantly, many of them, the ones that are close to our communities, are under risk because of development. And so I think we need to make sure that we keep that importance and we get the connectivity of the paths and the networks and the bridle paths. I have the same issue with a bridle way that has 20 properties on it. They're constantly asking me for it to be maintained. It's constantly got potholes in it. And my utility companies are constantly using it as a diversion route. So it takes all the traffic from the village regularly. So, as I say, I do think we need to look at this again, and I think we need to be looking at our byways and connecting these footpaths and the connectivity with cycle routes, because this is really important work for the future. Don't think there's anything else I had on here because
They were mainly comments. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the questions were asked.
Go on, Nick.
What you've missed out, or what you've omitted to say, is obviously footpaths and bridleways running across private land. The landowner is responsible for keeping them in a suitable state for being accessed. I assume, and this is rising up from what Jackie's saying, I assume you have, that's what your officers are doing, is instructing and telling landowners, and when there are gates across, fences have not been put down, the ploughed field has not been restored when I think it's 5 days of ploughing, but whatever it is, such you can reject, that is part of their work. Is that so?
That's correct. And that forms a big part of the sort of workload that faces them. Many landowners are very cognizant of what they need to do and fulfil their duty. However, there are landowners that are really quite challenging, and that takes up an immense amount of time for officers to actually go out, inspect, serve notice, and then re-inspect to find it hasn't been undertaken. And then we proceed through a enforcement approach, and very often at the last minute it would be sorted out, but that's taken up quite a bit of officer time to chase that through the system.
Okay, Ian.
Get off my land. Right, swiftly. The third and fourth paragraphs of your executive summary, I'll read the fourth one for brevity. One of the most significant benefits of the public rights of way network is the promotion of physical activity. Walking, cycling and horseback riding along these paths offer opportunities for regular exercise, which is crucial for maintaining good health and mental well-being, which everyone will fully agree with. Pointing at you, Nick, is we can stick in millions of pounds knocking down a couple of squash courts and building extensions and stuff on our leisure centres. Is there a way that you can perhaps access more funding for redressing the balance along here? And because these are the roots of health. Thank you.
Well, we are shortly about to start the budget process for next year, and we're waiting to see what the heads of service bring forward in terms of their wish list and see whether there's any additional funding asked for in there. But of course, you know, we have to prioritise how we spend our money, and as you know, as we say on a regular basis, We have a significant element of funding that goes to looked after children, looked after adults, and that doesn't leave huge amounts left. And as I've said, as Dave said, if we wanted to, somebody asked a question a few minutes ago, Jackie asked the question, is 15 million enough for roads? And the answer to that is no. We have to prioritise, but we can certainly have a look and see what offices come forward, but it will have to come from other service areas.
Okay.
What I'd just add in there for information really, we are looking at producing a hierarchical approach to the network so that rather than just going on a bridleway, byway is higher than a bridleway, we're looking at it from a perspective of use and network connectivity. We're going to develop a hierarchy so that will then enable us to perhaps prioritise funding into areas where it benefits the highest use, because at the moment that isn't in place, and it's an approach that we take within highways, and I think that it's something that looking at it in rights of way, that would be of benefit as well.
Okay, right. Thank you. So now we've got the recommendations for that. So A is to note the contents of the report and the progress that is being made in the relation to the maintenance and management of the public rights of way in Wiltshire. B, request a further update to this committee on the maintenance and management of the public rights of way network before May 2025, including how the council is learning from good practice at other local authorities, service, budgets, work with volunteer groups, the enforcement, activities of the countryside, officers, and the development of network use data. Can I have a proposal for that? Yeah. Thank you, Jackie. And a seconder, Derek? Okay. All in favour of that? Right, great. Okay, thank you very much. Number 10, executive response to the final report of the speed limit assessment task. Nick, if you've got anything to add to this, I would recommend that as members we all accept this. But Nick, anything to add? No?
No.
No, everyone accept that one? Okay. Right, forward work plan. Going to get this over the line by 2 o'clock. Giving it 2 minutes. Forward work plan, 139 to 46. Any comments on the plan? No? 1 minute to forward the work plan. Seconder for that? Yep, right, in favour, great. Okay, urgent items, please. No urgent items. Okay. Well, I've just broken all records and taken 3.5 hours to do this meeting. I'm declaring the meeting closed at 13:59. It doesn't sound bad, so okay. Thank you for all your attendance. It's been a big meaty one, putting all that together. Safe journey home, everyone. I'm going to have to stay here now for over your scrutiny. Meeting closed.